That's all right. One of the monitors out. That's all right. Live streaming's on. Cool. Councillors, good morning. I will bring the 860th round of the Planning Regulation Committee to order and open the meeting at 9:07. Good morning to all committee members and visiting councillors. We have Mick up front with us today, and good morning to all of our officers behind the glass as well. We'll kick straight into items. Item 1, attendance and apologies. I have none received. No leave of absence requests. Confirmation of minutes. Can I seek a mover for the 859th round minutes? Councillor Doran, seconded Councillor Gates. Can I quickly check there's no clarifications or concerns to raise in those minutes? In that case, we'll take the vote to receive the minutes of the previous meeting. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimous. Item 4, conflict of interest declarations. I'm aware of 3 conflict of interest declarations to start with. Councillor Fowler will have first crack.
Thank you, Chair. Just wait for the support to pull it up. As councillors are already aware, my property is within close proximity to the Oxenford quarry. My previous declarable conflict of interest, which was voted on unanimously by councillors, does provide clearance that I may participate in decisions despite my conflict of interest because the interest is minor and of a remote nature such that a reasonable person would trust that the final decision will be made in the public interest. While the previous resolution is broad and provides clearance, it is my view that the decision to be made for the purpose of item 6.5 today is distinct from the decision which was the subject of my previous declarable conflict of interest. This is having regard to the context of the previous declarable conflict of interest being more appeal related and the fact that I have not previously participated in a decision related to the extension of the quarry. So, Chair, for completeness, I feel it's appropriate to raise a further declarable conflict of interest in relation to item 6.5 today to ensure that my general clearance also covers the more specific subject matter being the extension application. So the nature of this declarable conflict of interest is that the property I own is approximately 400 to 500 metres from the existing Oxenford quarry operations, and the reasons why my participation would improve decision-making in the public interest are that I believe I can best represent the interests of the local community by participating in decisions about this matter as an informed and balanced ratepayer and elected representative. The proximity of my property to the quarry does not impact my ability to make impartial decisions, as I do not stand to gain or lose a benefit different from a significant proportion of other persons in the local government area. Also, as previously stated, the interest is minor and of a remote nature such that a reasonable person would trust that the decision would be made in the public interest.
Councillors, is there any questions of the conflict raised today? I really appreciate Councillor Fowler. I think it's the right decision that while you had clearance in regards to the appeal proceedings, I do think it was definitely the right thing to do today to put a new one in for completeness. I'm happy to move the procedural motion. Did you have a question, Councillor Gates, or happy to second? Very good. So I'm happy to move the procedural motion on the screen that despite the councillor's conflict of interest, it is definitely in the best interests of all of us in this chamber and the councillor's community for the councillor to continue to be part of the process. So the words that are there are fine. With me, it is in the public interest. Councillor Gates is happy to second that procedural motion. Is there any questions or concerns? Councillor Young?
Chairman, I won't vote because I have a conflict to do.
Understood. Councillor Martin, the same will apply to you. Councillor Gates?
I'd like to add for the benefit of other members regarding Councillor Fowler. She has worked tirelessly on this since she has become the elected representative. And so I just want to make it clear to anyone who might be tuning in today who has a concern that she has worked unbelievably hard to make sure that she considers all aspects. So I fully support her involvement. The community needs her here.
Thank you, Councillor Gates, for that. Councillors, if there's no other questions, we'll take the vote on the procedural motion. All those in favour? Councillor Hamill, Councillor Gates, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Doran, Councillor O'Neill. Please recall that Councillor Young and Councillor Martin and Councillor Fowler did not vote. Councillor Young, we might go to yours next.
Chairman, the property owned is located approximately 400 to 500 metres from the existing Oxenford quarry operations. That's what I've been given. It's on the screen. My previous declarable conflict of interest voted on unanimously by councillors, I won't say that again, on Tuesday the 28th of May this year, provided clearance for me to participate in decisions.
Sorry to interrupt. This is the wording of mine. I just wanted to let Chamber Support know that they've copy and pasted my conflict of interest into this one. That's not...
I think it's the same circumstances.
Councillor
I think it's
Young.
the same circumstances.
Yes, that's my understanding as well. Continue,
Now I'll have to
please.
say unanimously again.
Yeah.
My previous declarable conflict of interest voted on unanimously by councillors on the 28th of May 2025 provided clearance for me to participate in decisions despite the conflict, as the interest then was deemed minor and of a remote nature, such that a reasonable person would trust that the decision would be made as in the public interest. The previous resolution was broad and provided ongoing clearance, but it's my view that the decision to be made for the purpose of item 6.5 today is distinct from the decision that was made that was the subject of the previous declarable conflict of interest, and I'm hereby declaring, seeking Council's permission for me to be involved in the decision today.
Councillors, does anyone have any questions for Councillor Young on this? Councillor Doran?
Thanks, Chair. Just because it is slightly different for Councillor Young as it was for Councillor Fowler, could you take us through, I accept everything there and I accept that there's no conflict, but could you take us through for the record what your position was when the matter was discussed in 2021, albeit a different decision that's being made today, but did this affect that involvement in that decision in 2021?
Sorry, I'm not sure if I followed this. My declaration here mentions the decision made earlier this year.
Yep.
The decision made in 2021 I haven't referred to, but I was enabled by council to participate in the decision at that point in time despite the conflict.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't have any questions and I'm happy to second that if you're going to move it, Chair.
No worries at all. So I am happy to move the same procedural motion as we did with Councillor Fowler, that it is in the public interest for Councillor Young to participate in the decision, and that enables Councillor Young to continue to keep his community fully updated as well. If Councillor Doran is happy to second the procedural motion, please.
Sorry, through you. Councillor Young, you live 400 metres from the quarry, is that right?
I think it's a little bit further. I think the front
500.
gate is about 500 metres.
Okay, cool. Thanks. I just wasn't sure about that.
No, that's fine. And just clarifying, they do live in separate houses.
Yep. And where it says property I own, well, that's a long-standing relationship between me and the Commonwealth Bank of Australia. I don't own it as such, but it's mortgaged to me. Gets deeper and deeper.
Okay, so I'm happy to move the same procedural motion. Councillor Doran is happy to second. I'll just confirm for the record one more time, there's no further questions to raise on this conflict. We'll take the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Hamill, Councillor Gates, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Doran, Councillor O'Neill. Please record that Councillor Young, Fowler and Martin did not vote.
Thanks, Chair. And I'd just like to draw one other matter to your attention. I'm aware that the Wildlife Protection Society of Queensland made a submission in regards to this application. I was previously a member of the WIPSQ Gold Coast branch back in about 2014. I'm not making a declaration as such, but I'm just alerting you to that in case anyone wants to interrogate that. I don't believe it's a conflict.
No, and Councillor Young, just checking, they made a submission in regards to the original application, is what you're referring to?
Both that and more recently they've made a submission about this particular application for the extension.
Ben, confirming you're not a financial member of that group any longer?
No, I was a member for 1 year back in 2014 and I've not discussed the matter with any of the members.
I'm fairly comfortable that over a decade passing that you're not a financial member, don't hold an executive position is a much big enough gap there. Does any councillor have a concern with that or happy to take that as it being aired, and we'll leave it at that? Okay, Councillor Martin, that leaves us with yours.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm making a declaration today because one, as I understand it, a close personal friendship of mine is part of a subsidiary company of New Crush, being the Newman Group, and there's a range of companies. I suppose growing up on the southern Gold Coast, yeah, there's quite a lot of Newmans. They're a business that's been on the coast for a very long time, so I knew quite a lot of them. But however, I'm making this direct declaration today because I would consider Jacques Newman, who has I think either a shareholder arrangement or is a trustee, is one of my closest friends. We have a lot of friends along the way, but I think, when it's an inner circle, I would go to his house, he would be at mine. So in an abundance of caution, I have no commercial or financial arrangement with Mr. Newman, but just to avoid any perceived conflict of interest around the decision, being one of the closest friends that I have, I'm just going to leave the room for that decision. So council is not... Yeah, so I won't be participating. I am going to leave the room, given there is that close personal relationship. So I just wanted to explain that to councillors, that I'm going to make that declaration.
Councillor Patterson, did you have a question for Councillor Martin?
Before Councillor Martin, I was going to say I think it's prescribed conflict, but if he's leaving the room, thank you.
Anything else for Councillor Martin, councillors? In that case, Councillor Martin, when we come to item 6.5, we'll get you to leave the room then, and we thank you for putting that on the record and making sure that there can't be any concern in regards to the decision. Councillors, that is the 3 conflicts of interest declarations I'm aware of. Is there any other conflicts to be raised this time? Very good. In that case, we will go to the starred items. Councillor Patterson has indicated she's happy to star item 6.2. Can I check that no other councillor wish to keep that open? In that case, we will star item 6.2. Councillor Gates.
I'd like to unstar 6.1, please.
Unstar 6.1. Councillor O'Neill. 6.3. Councillor Martin. 6.4.
6.4 and 6.6, Chair.
And Councillor Fowler. 6.5. So my read of it is that we have item 5.1, the forward planning schedule, and item 6.2 remaining as starred. I'm happy to move those. I seek a seconder. Councillor Young, all those in favour? The starred items have been dealt with. That moves us to item 6.1. Good morning to Trina, Sam and Troy. How are we all today? Councillor Gates, would you like the presentation on this one?
I think it's important. This is a big one. Thank you.
Good morning, councillors, through the chair. Just to provide some project context on the Northern Marine Precinct Master Planning project located in STEIGLITZ, is to plan for the long-term growth and development for the marine industry sector and for the future demand and recreational boating. The project boundary, as shown on screen, is approximately 190 hectares, including existing waterfront marine industry and rural zoning within the urban footprint. The precinct is located on southern Moreton Bay waterways, just north of Jacobs Well, and south of Cabbage Tree Point Village, adjoining the northern boundary, which you can see in this aerial. For today's presentation is to provide an update on Stage 2A outcomes of the project. This stage completes a number of initial technical assessments through to 2024, including need and land use assessments as shown across the top of this diagram. Alongside early stakeholder engagement outcomes in the right corner, coming together with technical work with a summary recommendations report with insights to be provided as part of today's presentation. But the first to community and stakeholder engagement outcomes from late 2023, this slide provides the highlights of interest. Aware, informed and survey response targets were reached. Mapping contributions on the interactive map provided ongoing input into opportunity and challenge identification. 15 attendees participated in Talk to the Planner meetings. in the local area with the highest interest from local residents and project area landowners. City officers, in partnership with the former Chief Investment Office, met with key businesses within the Coomera Marine Precinct, noting the project team also had a broader presence to other business and visitors, stakeholders, by attending the Gold Coast Marine Careers and Jobs Expo. Across all the engagement activities, feedback was analysed to identify common aspirations, concern and information gaps for consideration in future project work. This slide represents the results analysis by recurring topic across each theme precinct. Interest in recurring topic differs by specific stakeholders, with local residents focusing on environment and place-related matters, compared to business stakeholders focusing on more the economic and infrastructure-related matters. This slide provides a summary of the inputs and outputs of this stage of work. Draft opportunities and challenges inputs identified since stage 1 were developed further by stage 2A technical investigation inputs to prepare opportunities and challenge mapping under each of the 4 precinct themes. The interactive map pin contributions during engagement activities provided feedback on these maps, supported by a survey to understand local values to reflect in their vision, and what should be considered in future planning relating to each precinct theme. The output resulted in draft land use concepts, as indicated here, intended to guide ongoing investigations outlined in the summary recommendations. The draft opportunities and challenge mapping consulted on have been finalised as key insight maps, as shown on page 241 to 244 of the agenda. This is an example of the changes under the environment and resource theme that captures additional callouts and refinement of ideas. As an overview of technical investigation insights, the marine needs assessment identified ongoing growth and investment in the sector over the next 20 years. This includes an opportunity to complement existing operations in the Coomera Marine Precinct by focusing on smaller recreational marine boating markets, alongside complementary infrastructure for activities, including tourism, recreational boating access, and education. Further work is needed to determine land, area, waterfront access, and phasing requirements, noting the 190 hectare project area has potential to provide for long-term need. Insights from environmental, hydrology, and infrastructure are shown on this slide. A significant number of potential environmental aspects need to be worked through alongside hydraulic resilience matters. These 2 aspects will be the subject of detailed investigations being progressed or planned, with internal stakeholders involved in the scoping of these studies. Lastly, infrastructure improvements will be needed over the long term for the precinct to realise its full potential. The draft vision and guiding principles will be key to refining concepts through stage 2B to inform master plan options. At this stage, these do not represent a future state plan, but rather a high-level intent to guide ongoing work. These are available on page 246 to 247 of the agenda, with the 2 concepts differences being a wholly land-based outcome, as shown here on this slide, compared to an internal waterway adjoining land-based outcomes for additional waterfront potential seen here. Both will need to consider existing drainage flow paths. The legend elements relate to the intent, which is summarised on page 246 of the agenda, and is subject to evolve as further work is completed to confirm land use outcomes. To summarise ongoing technical investigations for stage 2B, a detailed hydrology assessment is underway, with other work in the areas listed, with environmental investigations being planned into next year. Again, internal stakeholders involved in scoping will consider alignment or benefits to other work programs across departments. The project team will also continue to engage with Gold Coast Waterways Authority, acknowledging their recent work on their draft Our Waters Future framework. The finalisation of technical work will inform master planning options to be presented to Council for consideration. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions, Councillor Gates?
Yeah, I have a few questions.
Okay.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chairman. I'm interested in the pink area that you just showed as the complementary uses. When I represented that area, there was huge dissent from the Cabbage Tree Point community about that area being utilised for waterfront industry. All the homes in Royal Palm Drive, which is the closest street to the east, there was strong opposition to it. So I haven't read the technical investigation thoroughly. So can you tell me what type of uses those might be? I mean, I had a visit to the boatworks just last week, and the operation is significant, and I would imagine there would be a large impact from complementary uses. So I just wondered what type of uses might be expected in that pink region.
Through the Chair, thank you, Councillor Gates. At this stage, we haven't worked through the exact detail as shown on plan in the pink area. It is more of an intent. But by saying non-complementary uses, non-industry uses, what we are seeking to do is take that further and define what could be appropriate. And that would also involve engagement with the relevant stakeholders as well, the community in that local village. But as an example, what could be looked at is things that provide a public benefit or a community use, open space, acknowledging the intention to provide a buffer in the first instance. But it will have to come down to, well, what's best placed there in terms of meeting the long-term potential of the precinct, ensuring that amenity in the long term is maintained in that location.
Okay, I'd like to see it as a buffer, just personally. Again, with regard to the technical investigations, I was involved in an application for a motocross track on the corner of Gross Road and the Stapleton-Jacobswell Road, which is a long way to the west from this location, and it could not be approved because of the vegetation, and it was either seagrass or marine grass. I can't recall what, but I'm wondering how there is a possibility of developing this as intended when so far to the west and so much further away from the water there was that situation where there was that sensitivity around, and I think it was federal government legislation that prevented its approval. So has there been that level of investigation about what might hinder this project here?
Through the Chair, Councillor Gates, I referred to environmental studies that have been planned into next year, so agreed that is a critical aspect that needs to be considered. So while the hydrological study is underway, it is intended that environmental is also a critical aspect, and we seek to understand, using some of those examples, are there any showstoppers that need to be considered?
It was
I think it's important we look at that.
Councillor Gates.
Sorry?
It was Salt Cooch held up, the other one.
Can't remember.
Yeah, it was Salt Cooch. Not too much Salt Cooch in cane fields.
Well, there is next to the gun club.
Yeah.
Which is...
Yeah. So that's wetland next door, but in here there's no Salt Cooch is mapped. So there's federal mapping you can look up, and there's no federal mapping over this area.
All right, I don't recall it being Salt Cooch, but anyway. I also wondered in regard to the consultation, was Maritimo consulted, please?
Through the Chair, Councillor Gates, we work with the Chief Investment Officer at the time to make those contacts for a meeting. At that time, we weren't able to meet with Maritimo, being they weren't available at the time. But what we did commit to at further stages of the project, certainly re-engaging with them, considering they didn't have the opportunity to meet with us as part of this early engagement step.
Okay, well, for the benefit of new councillors, there's a massive approval for an international marine precinct adjacent to the Coomera Marine Precinct at the moment, and it's just about to set sail. And I think it's really important that they be consulted on this, and if it hasn't been able to occur now, I would strongly suggest that that occurs. I'd also like to know, is it possible, on page 78, I'd like to know if it is at all possible who the people within the Coomera Marine Precinct, the landowners were that were consulted, and also the attendees at the community gatherings. I'd just like to have an idea, a better idea of who has so far been spoken to about the project, please.
Through the Chair, Councillor Gates, your first question on who do we meet with within the Coomera Marine Precinct. So again, working with the Chief Investment Office, we sought to meet with 5 of those key operators within the precinct. So Marantino, as you mentioned, unfortunately we weren't able to meet with. BRP was the other stakeholder that we weren't able to get contact with for a meeting. But the 3 that we were successful to meet with were the Boatworks, Gold Coast City Marina and Riviera.
Right. Okay, thank you. And is there feedback provided within this?
It is there's a table in the agenda report that provides a summary across all the stakeholders, but there are specific comments in the attachments to the report.
Okay, sorry, I didn't get to that attachment. That's all for the moment.
Sorry, through the Chair, your second question around who we met with the community. So for the talk to the planner questions, we did have a location up at Cabbage Tree Point where they had opportunity to meet with us directly. For the most part, they were either local residents within the village, project land owners, or a small number of business representatives in that local area.
Okay. I'm just a little confused, and I don't know if you can enlighten me. Because of the wide ownership, I mean, I know that it's all in private land ownership. So how is it proposed that this proceed? I don't get it.
How is it proposed that we zone areas?
Well,
remembering, we're not suggesting that we build this. We're just doing the land use planning as we do for everything else.
Okay.
Is it? Sorry, I'm a bit.
Yeah, I just don't understand how. Are you expecting the private sector to come and buy up this land and develop?
I'm not expecting anything from it. Like, this was a piece of work that council agreed to undertake to identify marine use land for the future. Remembering that a big chunk of this already has the purple on it.
Yeah.
The purple, so the dark purple is marine industry use. Yeah. Roughly, obviously, all of the southern end, Bent Horizon Shores, has already got it, and then pretty well half of the land up to the township. But the different private sector. This isn't a council project, and it's not going to be a state government project.
Sorry, I wasn't aware that the marine zoning went up to that red line.
Yeah, it does. It goes further than that, Councillor Gates. So if I could just briefly say, part of the reason I was happy to support this piece of work when it was first brought to council was that you had all of Horizon Shores was purple, and then there was a strip of purple went all the way up the waterfront to directly behind the township. Mm-hmm. And the reason I was very happy to support it was for the same reasons you raised before, that I think it's appropriate to do the land use planning now so we get that buffer between the residential and any future marine use, because as it currently stands, someone can lodge an application in that purple strip right up against the back of those houses, and we'd have very little of any control to stop marine industry right up against the back of the residential.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it does, but it doesn't go up to behind Royal Palm Drive.
It does. If you look at the current mapping and city plan, it goes all the way up, and it actually goes on the other side of Cabbage Tree Point Road on the Peninsula land, if you remember.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So you go, the purple strip goes all the way up.
Oh well, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Did you have any further questions, Councillor Gates?
No, that's it.
Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Fowler, we strayed the debate there a little bit. Your questions?
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question just about the infrastructure. So we're looking at the preliminary investigations and, you know, roads, water, sewer, energy, telecommunications, it's considerable. At what stage will council be presented with those indicative costings and funding options, and would it be staged? And is the expectation that the private sector will expect council to underwrite the majority of that enabling infrastructure, or would that rest with the private land owners?
Through the Chair, Councillor Fowler, don't have the specific questions on what that might look like at a future state in terms of sequencing and delivery, but what would be intended as part of the master plan is actually outline what that could look like as a way forward. Given that we're in stage 2B at the moment, we'll be working towards that, and I guess it would be a part of stage 3 to work that through.
Will the costings be broadly looked at that point, and I guess the model of how it would be staged and brought onto market, and what would lie with council versus private?
Through the Chair, that would be the intention through stage 3.
Thank you. And just, if I may, Chair, just follow up. I just had a question in regards to the industry demand and compatibility, because in the marine industry needs assessment that was in the report, it excludes super yachts and large commercial vessels due to site constraints. How does the business case for the precinct stack up if the focus is only on smaller vessels? And is there a risk of duplication or competition with the existing Coomera Marine Precinct activities?
Through the Chair, that is a good question, and that's why we've been talking with stakeholders within the Coomera Marine Precinct. Certainly the intention of this project is to not duplicate and conflicts with the business opportunities currently within the Coomera Marine Precinct. You are right, there is a focus on smaller boat manufacturers as an example, but acknowledging in the long term we will see an increased demand for that otherwise cannot be accommodated within the Coomera Marine Precinct, given that it will get to a point where that's built out. But certainly what has been identified is a continued growth in the recreational boating market, being as South East Queensland is growing. There's a lot of interest to own recreational craft, but of course as our urban areas keep densifying, there is that potential where there's a long-term need for that storage aspect. So certainly that's something that could be as an opportunity in this location, being that recreational boat storage, as an example, is something that's relatively undercatered for in the city.
Thank you, Chair. I just had one final question. In stage 3, or has the work already been done on the net additional economic uplift the precinct would generate based on that recreational smaller vessel potential?
Through the Chair, not at this stage, but it's intended that a property market aspect would be done moving towards the end of stage 2B.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Martin?
Thanks, Chair. Just on the two concepts, obviously the land-based waterfront versus the canal option, will both go into the master planning, or at what point, I suppose, is one option being progressed?
Through the Chair, Councillor Martin, it would be intended that when we get to the end of stage 2B, we would be looking at presenting one in terms of what would be recommended for the master plan pathway moving forward. So opportunities still can look at both, but the intention would be to provide one for Council's consideration.
And just in regards to, obviously, the key resource area, prior to that sort of single option that we're pursuing, would we have advice back from the state around, buffers around that KRA and impacts to that resource?
Through the Chair, correct, and we have met with state agencies already, including the Department of Environment and Science, to talk about their views around those key resource matters.
Follow on from that. Have they, so in those initial meetings, has the state sort of provided, I guess I'm just interested in, obviously there's the resource direct area, but then there's a whole buffering. Have they provided any, have you got any sort of key outtakes from that around the buffering to those existing residential homes for this consideration?
Through the Chair, sorry, Councillor Martin, just to clarify your question, are you talking about the buffer within the project area or as it relates to the surrounding area, including the village?
I suppose I'm interested in the buffer between the KRA and then this new, if it was canal-based, I suppose I can see the sort of sweeping blue lines going through, the resource area and around what appears to be a buffer. I'm just wondering, is that sort of snake that goes around the yellow, is that the sort of buffer zone that the state is saying we need to have, or that could be less or more?
Thanks for clarifying. Through the Chair, for that buffer area specifically, the advice that we did get back is not to say that there's opportunity within that buffer area, but certainly whatever the outcomes would be cannot affect the ability to extract that resource at a point in time in future. So where that buffer can be reduced or extended, that hasn't been part of this discussion, just more around protecting the ability for that key resource to be extracted when it's needed.
Any other questions for officers? I'm happy to move the item if there's a seconder. Councillor Young, thank you for that. I'm just going to very quickly say to appreciate the questions and discussion today, especially to Councillor Gates for raising the pink area. I can't remember what we're actually terming it, but it was what I raised my previous. I said that's a terrible terminology used. Like, call it what it is, and what definitely my intent with it is to get a buffer to the residential area. I made the point before when this piece of work was first presented to council, 4 or 5 years ago now, as something to proceed forward with. That was why I was supportive at the time, was that it enabled some land use planning to be done to hopefully mean that we got a suitable outcome to the residential area in the future. The other reason I was very supportive of doing this work too is that, to Councillor Fowler's points around infrastructure, that when you've already got zone marine land out there and you've got some use being taken up already, it's going to trigger infrastructure uses in the future. Having some planning done for that of what capacity, especially back at Pimpama Sewage Treatment Plant, will be needed to cope with that is fairly important. I would like to make the point, just in case anyone doesn't appreciate, this is really long-term land use planning. I don't think there's any idea or suggestion that someone's going to look to a development out here next week. It is long-term future land use planning. I think that is really appropriate and really smart to do, because while there's been a bit of chat about Coomera today, as Troy mentioned, Coomera has got a constraint of it will reach its land use. Now, that's not any time soon. There's still a fair bit of land left, but sometime in the future, Coomera Marine Works and everything around it will be built out, and we'll have a problem that there is nearly no other opportunity in southeast Queensland for a generous amount of marine industry land to be placed, and especially a land in the right location for that recreational view, which I think is really important, because the feedback I've had in the Coomera Marine Precinct recently is that in their future plans, probably redevelopment of some of those sites where they currently cater for smaller recreational uses to focus more on the bigger boats will occur. That means that that smaller use and that recreational side gets pushed out somewhere else. This is a great location in southeast Queensland to allow that to occur. The final thing I'd like to make a point on is that there's already a lot of marine industry use happening in this area, so we're not bringing something brand new into Cabestry Point or the north end of Jacobs Well. You've already got Horizon Shores, which is well established. You've got some marine use occurring in the band along the water, so this is smart, long-term land use planning for the future in the right location. We've got future stages to come, which will have more detail on a lot of those questions raised today. And I look forward to that, and I look forward to the community getting a chance to have more of a say in what that pink band looks like in the future as well, because from the couple community meetings I held, there was an incredibly strong interest in knowing what that land around that little township might look like. And that would be really good to get some more clarity for those landowners who are existing, but more importantly, a lot of landowners who are moving into Cabestry Point and may not actually know that there's marine zone land directly behind them. So I think the sooner that we've got that sorted and that anyone buying into that area knows what can and can't happen right next door to them would be a good thing. Councillor Gates.
Chairman, just on that last point that you made, I wondered, as part of the master planning, why we couldn't give consideration to expanding Cabestry Point into that. It was at the Saltman land, the land on the corner. I think it was owned by the Saltman family, stretching my memory, but why that land couldn't enlarge the Cabestry Point village and keep it quite separate from the marine uses. If we're looking at a rezoning and a master planning exercise, wouldn't it make sense to add to the residential growth on that corner?
The KRA buffer would stop that happening at the moment.
The what?
The key resource area buffer. So if we could go back to the map, sorry, because I don't think it was quite pointed out, the buffer area is actually shown on that map. So that band, you've got the yellow, and then you've got that band that runs just behind the back of the houses, the black line that runs around, that's the KRA buffer area. You can't do anything in that buffer area at the moment, residential or marine or anything else.
What is the key resource?
Is the sand, is the yellow area. which that continues across the road and runs through the paddocks next door. I get your point, Councillor Gates, and it's probably the right thing to be doing in the future, but until that key resource is won and that buffer area is no longer there, I don't think anyone's doing anything in that buffer area.
So is there still a 500 metre buffer between any key resource area and development, or
that's the mapped? That is what the mapped area is there, 500 metres from the edge. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wondered if there was enough critical mass for the rest of the project to proceed, if we could get around that and just extend the residential area. But maybe it's something you can have a look at and let me know.
I think getting to the pink and then what happens after that would be a logical step with it.
All right. Thank you.
Did anyone else wish to speak against the motion or contribute in general? In that case, I'll close debate and take the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Officers, thank you very much. That takes us to item 6.3. Councillor Patterson starts 6.2.
Where have we got this one?
Officers, we're at item, councillors, we're at item 6.3. We'll take the presentation.
Through the Chair, item 6.3 is for a material change of use to establish 20 multiple dwellings across Coolangatta Road, KIRRIBIN Street and ADINA Avenue. The application is impact accessible due to the height of the development exceeding the prescribed 9 metres and 2 stories and exceeding density. As shown, the subject site is uniquely located on the southeastern edge of the low-density residential zone in BILINGA, adjoining the Gold Coast Airport and opposite the BILINGA Fire and Rescue Station. The site is situated along a major arterial route with the Gold Coast Highway in close proximity and medium-density residential zoning located to the northeast across the Gold Coast Highway. The subject site consists of 7 lots, each currently improved by a dwelling house with 3 frontages to Coolangatta Road, ADINA Avenue and KIRRIBIN Street. Unlike typical suburban neighbourhoods characterised by detached dwelling houses and consistent low-rise built form, the subject site is situated in an area that is heavily influenced by surrounding non-residential land uses and a major transport corridor. As shown, the 2 directly adjoining properties are detached dwelling houses. However, surrounding built form consists of industrial buildings associated with the Gold Coast Airport and BILINGA Fire and Rescue Station. These distinct locational characteristics support a more intensive residential outcome than might otherwise be expected in a low-density residential zone. The proposal seeks to establish 20 multiple dwellings in a townhouse form arranged across 10 buildings. The individual buildings are proposed to be 2 to 3 stories with third-story elements outlined in red and a maximum height of 9.97 metres. The development will include a mix of dwelling typologies, with 10 3-bedroom units and 10 4-bedroom units. Each unit is afforded 2 car parking spaces and a total of 4 shared visitor car parks, which is compliant with the acceptable outcome of the Transport Code. Each dwelling is afforded private open space through balconies and backyards, and residents will share a communal open space area inclusive of a pool and barbecue. Along Coolangatta Road, the development presents as low-rise detached dwelling-style houses, predominantly 2 stories, with third-story elements recessed within the site so they are not visible from the Gold Coast Highway or pedestrian realm. The design incorporates modulation, a varied palette of colours and materials, and landscaping external to the fence that enhances the streetscape, while vehicle access is limited to 2 driveways to maintain a spacious and open character. Fronting ADINA Avenue, the design presents as a series of dwelling houses, ensuring the streetscape retains a low-rise residential feel with 3 shared VXOs across 6 dwellings. Setbacks are AO compliant to each dwelling, and third stories are partially recessed into the site to reduce the mass of built form. No fencing has been proposed along ADINA Avenue, with 3 canopy trees being proposed, which contributes to the residential streetscape character and creates a feeling of openness. Oh, sorry, the presentation's different to what it's meant to be, but that's okay. To KIRRIBIN Street, balconies and windows engage with the street, and the modulation of the facades provides depth and variety, contributing to a high quality and attractive residential character. Third-story elements are articulated and designed to reduce bulk while contributing to a well-proportioned and visually appealing built form. The development has been designed with a strong landscape and public realm focus, with deep planting and feature canopy trees located to the street frontages outside of fence lines, as well as pedestrian footpaths internal to and surrounding the site. The design limits driveway crossovers to reduce hard stand, proposes no fencing where appropriate, and maintains compliant setbacks to adjoining residential land, creating a feeling of openness and a balance between built form and landscape areas. The city plan allows for multiple dwellings to occur in low concentrations in suburban neighbourhoods where sites provide dual frontage or are mapped for RD1 density. This site meets both locational tests with 3 street frontages and RD1 mapping. The proposal reflects a suburban neighbourhood character by delivering 10 distinctly separated build forms that resemble detached dwellings in layout and appearance. The development is located on a large site on a corner lot abutting non-residential land uses that provide a unique locational context to support the proposal. It is the only multiple dwelling land use within the low-density linear strip, consistent with the intended gentle scattering effect envisaged in specific outcome 3.3.14. The development enhances neighbourhood connectivity and cohesion through its orientation to 3 public road frontages and the inclusion of pedestrian pathways that connect the site internally and externally. The layout improves permeability and supports integration with the surrounding urban fabric. The proposal reflects a suburban neighbourhood character by delivering 10 distinctly separated building forms that resemble detached dwellings in layout and appearance. By delivering a housing option that remains residential in scale, the development accommodates a broader range of household types and contributes to social diversity and housing choice. While the proposal delivers 20 dwellings, it achieves this through a site-responsive design that distributes massing appropriately and delivering generous landscaping. 29 properly made submissions were received in relation to the proposed development, inclusive of 28 objections and 1 in support, and 4 not properly made submissions were received, inclusive of 3 objections and 1 in support. Letters of objections raise concerns regarding non-compliance with the low-density residential zone code, impact on local character and amenity, traffic and access concerns, prematurity in planning context, precedent and cumulative impact, displacement of renters and housing affordability, and insufficient parking. Officers have considered these matters raised in submission throughout their assessment and consider these matters have been appropriately addressed where applicable. Overall, officers consider the proposal maintains a built form that responds to the existing suburban character with a 2-storey frontage to Coolangatta Road and recessed 3rd-storey elements that avoid visual dominance and bulk, and includes generous landscaping, street tree planting, and pedestrian paths that create a green, safe, and attractive suburban streetscape. Officers consider the proposal represents an appropriate planning outcome for the site and recommend Council approve the development application in full with conditions. Councillors, there is an error on page 380 recommending approval for 3 multiple dwellings. Please note that this recommendation is meant to be 20 multiple dwellings. Thank you.
Zoe, thank you. Questions for officers? Go to Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Chair. My questions will centre around traffic and parking. I know that there is a SARA referral and it's come back that they had no problem with this intersection, but it is a really unique intersection. It's quite a short linear road, KIRRIBIN Street, that attaches to ADINA Avenue. ADINA Avenue also on the other side comes out from an internal road from the airport. Lots of emergency services coming out onto Coolangatta Road as well. I'm just questioning 14 extra vehicle movements when we've got 20 residences, 3 and 4 bedroom. We've got regulated parking. in that area, 4-hour parking. Can I just get some sort of sense of how we got 14 extra vehicle movements, and has the emergency services been counted as well? Because the fire service, actually their access is onto KIRRIBIN. It's virtually adjacent to the crossover for this development.
Yes, so it was, through our assessment, it equates to 1 additional vehicle trip every 6 to 7 minutes on average, and a total of 13 vehicle trips during peak hours. This was considered negligible on the greater network. Per hour, yes.
Sorry, can we just clarify that? I think, was the response 14 at peak time? So peak time is not every hour, peak time is certain times of the day?
Yes,
yeah,
correct.
It's morning and afternoon?
Yes, correct. It is considered that residents would still give way to emergency services vehicles. We can't really condition when residents do come and go from their house, but as you said, it was referred to Sarah, who did respond saying that there were no concerns with the existing intersection, and we couldn't reasonably condition any upgrades to this.
Thank you. Just in regards to parking, I didn't see in the report anywhere where we acknowledged that there is regulated 4-hour parking in that area. Was that taken into consideration?
Through the chair, the development does propose AO compliant car parking, so it's not considered that the development would rely on on-street car parking for residents or visitors. Sorry.
Just one more question, if I can. Did the Queensland Fire Service make a submission at all?
Through the chair, no, they did not make a submission.
Thank you.
Could I seek further clarity just in regards to the on-street parking? We don't typically, regulated or not regulated, that's a choice of someone wishing to park in the street. So we don't normally review that as part of the application. It doesn't matter if it's regulated or non-regulated to us, as long as they're compliant with the off-street car parking. That's where our concern is.
Yes.
Yeah. Councillor Young, did I see your hand then? Yes. Please.
Just following on from Councillor O'Neill's questions about parking. Most of the parking here is tandem parking, so it's one car behind another within the property. I'm not sure how realistically that can be achieved, and I would imagine a lot of people would park on the street. So is there capacity on the street between the driveways to accommodate vehicles?
Through the chair, the development actually proposes 1 less VXO than what is currently existing. There's currently 7 VXOs to the street. This is only proposing 6. So it is considered that it is improving the on-street car parking within the area, having that 1 less VXO. But the tandem parking arrangement is considered compliant with the city plan. We don't have any provisions that these be side by side or in a tandem arrangement, so we are satisfied that they do meet AO compliant car parking for the development.
So going back to my question, is there capacity within the street between the driveways to accommodate vehicles? Is there the length?
Sorry, through the chair, between the VXOs proposed to the street?
Yep.
Sorry, I might just pass this to Chris.
Thanks.
Good morning, councillors. Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, there is capacity on ADINA Avenue between the vehicle crossings for parking. There's also capacity on the KIRRIBIN Street frontage. The COOLANGATTA Road, what's happening there is we're relocating the bus stop to the southern side of those driveways. So there'll be limited capacity to park on the COOLANGATTA Road frontage, but certainly on KIRRIBIN and ADINA there's capacity.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Any further questions for officers? Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Just interested in parking as well, but the visitor car parks. So are all the visitor parks located, it seems like they're in one location rather than, say, on Coolangatta Road? Do officers consider, I guess, equally dispersing visitor car parks around the development, or how is it satisfying if they're co-located in one location?
Through the chair, they are kind of separated internally. So if you have a look at the site plan here, you've got two in between those, or on the opposite end of the 3 orange dwellings, and then 2 down next to the pink dwellings. So they are kind of separated internally to the development. We don't necessarily consider where these are placed or how these are dispersed, but they are dispersed within the development to accommodate the different residential dwellings in the development.
So there's no visitor sort of, I suppose, for the yellow or for the blue?
Through the chair, no. Technically, these 4 visitor car parks are shared with each dwelling, and there are, if you can see, pedestrian footpaths within the development and external to the development for visitors to kind of traverse to those dwellings. There is also capacity on the driveway for visitors to park on the driveway for those blue dwellings or yellow dwellings if they wish to. If that answers your question.
So is there capacity, so on the yellow and the blue, because I believe they're tandem, so is there still capacity, so one in the garage, a tandem behind, and then still a visitor would fit as well? So 3 cars tandem would fit without crossing over the VXO or the pedestrian path?
Through the chair, the yellow dwellings aren't tandem. They are double garage dwellings. They are tandem along here, and those orange ones, so I'm just trying to line up my site plan through there. So there's, is the question that there's no visitor car parks like directly adjoining those dwellings?
I guess I'm interested in the visitor car parking for the yellow and for the blue, and my understanding was they were tandem parks, so I didn't think they could hold visitor, but I'm open to being corrected if they actually can legally.
I can have a stab at that. Through you, Mr. Chair. So the yellow dwellings, so there's 1 garage space. The second resident space is on the driveway, so no, there is no ability, unless, of course, the resident only has 1 car, in which case they could park their visitor cars. The blue, same situation. So we've got 1 in the garage, 1 on the driveway. So in terms of the planning scheme or the transport code more specifically, it doesn't actually require, there's no requirement to disperse it. And as Zoe pointed out, there are internal pedestrian walkways from the visitor spaces generally to the dwellings, and my experience is residents would tell their visitors what the parking arrangements are on site prior to their arrival.
Any further questions for officers? We'll go into debate and you can comment in a sec, unless you're looking to move the item. In that case, I'll move the item and would seek a seconder. Councillor Gates. I'll open very quickly and then we can get into general comments. I'm really supportive of this outcome. So we have a situation where someone has taken the time and effort and probably a fair bit of finance to amalgamate 7 blocks together. Interestingly, it didn't come up with officers, but my understanding is in this zone, you could actually take each of these blocks individually and cut them in half. So could have been that someone went a block at a time and only got 14 dwellings out of it, but by them being joined together and that common use area being done the way it's done, you actually end up with 20. So an efficient use of the land to get more dwellings out of it. I think the other good thing of that approach is that instead of 14 separate developments that wouldn't have spoken to each other, would have had inconsistencies, arguments over driveways and landscaping, in this circumstance, a very big corner allotment gets consistency of landscaping, consistency of architecture and built form. So not only do we get more dwellings out of it, but I think we'll get a much superior product than what 14 individual applications might have looked like over a long period. The other convenience with this is that it'll all be done at once. If it would have been done 14 separate at a time, you could have seen construction fatigue over how many years, if decades, possibly, depending on how long people held on the blocks for. With this, while it'll be very busy during construction, I'm sure, at least it's all in and done in one hit, and that's done in the short term. So very supportive of this outcome. Would love to see more of this occur because it just proves that, while a lot of the focus in the city on additional dwelling supply tends to be on units and towers, there's actually opportunities like this where lots of opportunities like this to get slightly more dwellings than what you could get at a block at a time is a good outcome and something we should, I believe, be looking to support. Anyone wish to speak against the motion? I'll open the floor to general comment. Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Chair. Can I first of all acknowledge the residents who took the time to make submissions. with this application, and I'm sure they are fairly nervous because this is a change for this area, and I acknowledge that they will have some concerns, as I did initially, but there has been a lot of changes made to the application through assessment, and certainly we're seeing generous landscaping and the separation between the buildings and the built form being improved through the assessment. So thank you, officers, for taking the time to do that. Also, I think it gives another housing choice in the area. We don't want to see all the density on the eastern side of the highway. As I said, I know this will be a change for people in this area. I was concerned about the traffic situation, and hopefully that concern will not be upheld. But it is a busy area, but it's great to see that there's some that there may be some housing choice and affordability closer to the beach. So I am supporting this today. Thank you.
Councillor Dora, did you have a general comment? Anyone else wish to contribute? In that case, I will close debate and we'll take the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried unanimous. Officers, thank you very much. That moves us to item 6.4.
Through the chair. Good morning, councillors. This application is for a material change of use to establish a multiple dwelling consisting of 3 units at 66 Tallebuggera Drive in Palm Beach. The subject site is currently improved by a single dual occupancy and has a site area of 567 square metres. The surrounding development comprises residential uses and can be characterised as a mix of dwelling houses, dual occupancies and multiple dwellings. The subject site is located in the northern aspect of the suburb of Palm Beach, approximately 600 metres southwest of the Gold Coast Highway, and benefits from walkable access to Tallebuggera Creek and surrounding open space areas. The site is located within the medium density residential zone and is afforded a building height provision of 2 stories and 9 metres by the building height overlay map. The development triggers impact assessment as a result of the proposed building height exceeding that of the building height overlay. The designated flood level relative to the natural ground level in this area of Palm Beach significantly influences the design of multiple dwelling developments. In instances where the zone code permits 2 stories or 9 metres building height, a 3-storey built form is often necessary to provide 2 habitable levels above the designated flood level. The proposal seeks to establish a multiple dwelling consisting of 3 units in the form of a 13.05 metre and 3-storey with rooftop terrace building, comprising per unit 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms and various other living areas. It is noted the rooftop terrace meets the exclusionary provisions of the city plan story definition and therefore does not constitute a story. The built form itself is positioned towards the western boundary, which is to the right of the slide, to allow for vehicular access to the 3 double garages with an acceptable outcome compliant parking rate proposed. Visual interest is provided through the built form articulation of various and varied materiality on all facades along with landscaping, both at ground and on structure, to deliver an excellent standard of appearance. Officers consider building height is the key consideration for this proposed development. The section of the building highlighted in red depicts the extent of the building above the 9 metres in height from natural ground level. As a development, the development is seeking a 50% uplift in building height in terms of stories from 2 to 3, as the subject site is mapped within an urban neighbourhood. Specific outcome 3.3.2.1.9 of the strategic framework allows the proposal to achieve a height uplift subject to meeting the relevant benchmarks of up to 50%, also known as the uplift test. Regarding the benchmarks of the uplift test, officers consider the key aspects to be interfaces to surrounding neighbours and consistency with character of the locality. In relation to interfaces, as mentioned earlier, the built form is positioned primarily towards the western boundary, which is to the right of the slide. Through the assessment process, officers negotiated both improved setbacks and a reduction of building bulk to the rooftop terrace. The perspective at the top of the slide represents the lodge development plans, which originally presented a shear wall of 13 metres to the western boundary. The figure at the bottom of the slide represents the final proposed outcome, with key changes including the recessing of western-facing walls to the rooftop terrace with the exception of the lift shafts, the reduction of scale of the proposed privacy screening, which originally was solid and now comprise 50% of the privacy screen cutout area, an increased setback from 4.4 metres to 6 metres to Tallebudgera Drive, and the reduction in the scale of the pergola fascia wall as viewed from Tallebudgera Drive. Officers consider all of these to reduce the perceived impacts of bulk and scale to the rooftop terrace level. It is also noted a majority of these changes occurred post-public notification and addressed the concerns of submitters. In relation to the setbacks of other levels, it is noted encroachments to the acceptable outcome compliance setbacks are largely limited to architectural elements. The second key assessment consideration is consistency of the proposal with the character of the area. Officers undertook a character analysis, as identified on the slide, which generally comprises the two blocks fronting Tallebudgera Creek. It is important to note that the building height overlay map envisages a higher building height fronting Tallebudgera Creek, with the block behind providing a transition towards the lower density residential zoned land to the south of the subject site. Through the character analysis undertaken, officers observed this area of Palm Beach is currently undergoing change, with a series of developments both existing and approved, providing a similar built form outcome to that of the proposed development. The transition, as mentioned previously, is evident through taller buildings fronting Tallebudgera Creek, such as numbers 3 and 4, both of which are 5-storey 15-metre developments. Developments directly adjoining Tallebudgera Drive to the north reduce in height to 3 stories plus rooftop terrace, as identified by numbers 7 and 8, with developments south of the subject site transitioning towards the low-density residential zone land. This is the subject site as it currently exists. This photograph is of one of the existing developments mentioned as part of the character analysis at 61 Tallebudgera Drive, directly to the northeast of the subject site, across the road, which consists of 3 stories plus rooftop terrace. This development is also located across the road to the northeast of the subject site at 59 Tallebudgera Drive, which also consists of 3 stories plus rooftop terrace. While most buildings in this area are not 3 stories, similar height development exists and is becoming more prominent. As such, officers consider the proposed multiple dwelling aligns with the city plan's intended and the emerging local character for this area. During the public notification period, the proposal received 21 properly made submissions and 1 not properly made submission, all in objection. Submitters raised several concerns with the development, mostly surrounding building height, density and other design-related aspects, as well as impacts to the availability of on-street parking. As depicted, submissions were received from properties surrounding the subject site, with the exception of 1 submission received from interstate. While officers acknowledge the concerns raised by submitters, through the assessment process, officers have concluded the proposal is consistent with the applicable assessment benchmarks, including the off-street parking provision of the Transport Code and the uplift test of the strategic framework. Therefore, officers recommend this application be approved subject to conditions. Thank you.
Councillors, questions for officers? Councillor Young.
Just a question about building heights. Are we applying the building height to the actual entire building in this area, or the building plus, just the building, and then the rooftop terrace is not within the measurement?
The building height in terms of metres, 13.05 includes the rooftop terrace, so it's to the very top of the building.
Okay, so all these examples where you've given heights, that's including the rooftop terrace?
That's correct, yes.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks.
Nothing else, Councillor Young, for now?
That's all for now.
Councillor Martin, do I see your hand then?
Thanks, Chair. I wonder if you could go back to the slide with the building height, which showed the red being the uplift. This, which sort of depicts the uplift beyond the height. But I just wonder if you can clarify, in this zone, it's 2-storey or a meterage. So can one apply, or do they both apply equally? Are both considered part of it?
Through the chair, they both apply, and the one that should be considered is the one of greater variation. So in this instance, it's the story number. So that's seeking a 50% uplift.
Yeah. So in a case where we have a 2-storey or a 9-metre, the full 50% uplift would be 1 extra story. So if I sort of take the point that it might be, say, 40% of metres, but would it be if there's 1 extra story beyond 2 metres as the full 50% uplift?
Through the chair, that's correct, yeah.
I wonder, and so I wonder if you could just go to the local character analysis that sort of showed the next one, which showed the metres.
This one?
So of the examples, so obviously this site sits within the 2-storey 9-metre zone. And I wonder if you can show the other examples. Were any of the examples in the 9-metre zone, are there any other... Yep, that one, thank you. I can see a lot of the examples there are in the 15-metre zone, or the RD5, this being residential density number 3, but also the 9-metre zone. Were there any examples in the 9-metre zone that had either a 3-storey plus a rooftop or a 4 or 5-storey?
Yes, through the chair, sorry. So my understanding is there are a few developments in that 2-storey zone that do have the 3 stories plus rooftop terrace. Number 14 is shown up there, which is sort of further to the northeast up Tallebudgera Drive.
Sorry, Chair, if I could just clarify, though my understanding is 14 is in the 15-metre zone. If you toggle back, you can see there's an easement there just beside number 13. That actually sits in the 15-metre zone, not the 9-metre zone. So my understanding is there are no other examples, but I would happily ask officers, are there any examples of a 3 plus rooftop or 4 or 5 in the 9-metre zone?
So your map on page 464, so you've got a map on 463, then a map on 464, one has the stories and one has the densities.
Yeah, Chair, that slight pocket there,
yep.
The 15-metre zone does come down, but it actually still is a residential 3. So there has been examples of 3 plus rooftop in this little pocket because it has a lower density, but it does have a greater height.
So can officers just confirm the map on 463, which shows the stories, which includes the cutout that Councillor Martin's referring to where the 15 metres comes down. On the next page, you've then got the dwelling density is different. Are those maps correct?
Through the chair, that's correct. Yep.
Sorry, Councillor Martin, next question. Oh, sorry, a response from officers to that one maybe first?
Yeah. My understanding is there's no other that are 3 plus a rooftop or greater.
Through the chair, that's correct. On that side of the road, there's no other ones that have that 3-storey plus a rooftop.
Thanks, Chair. And then, so my question around site cover, this application's 56%. And I think even applying the uplift test, I think part of that 3.2.1.9 being the sort of slender bulk form. And I think even if I sort of cast my mind back to the previous DA we looked at in BILINGA, it's that impact story that we are looking at that we want to have as recessive, so sort of tapering down. I guess my question here is that 3rd story is the impact, that's the element that is the uplift, and that's how have officers considered that to be sort of promoting that slender built form on the 3rd story? Yeah. My observation is it's one of the bulkiest levels.
What are you calling the 3rd story? The 4th story?
No,
Well, that's probably the next question. The third story. The third story is the impact application. The fourth, I can't call it a story because officers at level. But that third story, which is the impact test, I suppose I'm seeking officers' view on how that has promoting that slender bulk form.
Through the chair, when we deal with the site coverage provisions, it talks about having various aspects, and you're right, one of them is a slender bulk form, but that's one of 4 tests in the performance outcome. We have a contributes to neighbourhood character and amenity, slender bulk form promotes an open and attractive skyline and facilitates small, fast-moving shadows. So as part of that, we sort of look at, and the top one talks about a balance between built form and green areas for private landscape, for landscape open space. So as you can see here, we've got a very heavily landscaped frontage to Tallebudgera Drive. We've got some landscaping on the building through some of those upper levels. We've got some variations in the design and some strong horizontal elements that break up the mass of the building. At a 56% site cover, that's probably fairly reasonable in terms of where council officers assess or play in that space in terms of a site coverage calculation, which we think is offset by a lot of those factors and a very heavily landscaped frontage that will contribute to the character of the area. And obviously the rooftop area that you mentioned is well recessed and probably wouldn't constitute anywhere near that 56% that you're talking about. But you're right, probably levels 2 and 3.
Clarification.
If I may. So my understanding is when you're going up to this level within 9 metres, that consideration of the top level is really for the 3rd level, not for the 4th level, right? Like, I mean, I'm just thinking about my own property, 9 metres. If I was to do that on my 3rd level, there's no way I'd be allowed to do that.
Through the chair, the site coverage doesn't change just because you're going up a couple of levels. It still requires 50% AO for site coverage. And if you're above 50%, we're playing in the performance outcome space. So that doesn't change if you're 2 levels or 3 levels.
So it's because it's performance-based that you're not doing that. If it wasn't performance-based, you'd be looking at this as the 3rd level as a certain percentage of the first 2 levels, right? But we don't do that. May I just ask a question? I just wanted another clarification, if I may, through you, Chair. When Councillor Martin asked the difference in the 2 sections, and it was identified that those ones that were the higher were only in that 15-metre section. So it is. Is there anything that's over 9 metres in the area, in the zoning where it's been proposed? On
Through
that
the
side of the
chair,
street?
I don't believe there are any applications on that side of Tallebudgera Drive that are over 9 metres, but there are other examples down there that you can see on page 464 that are 3-storey developments. So we have one in Budera Road that you can see, which is closer to the low density of residential, and 18, 19, 16 and 17 also on Budera that are 3-storey developments. But I think they're all around about the 9 metre height mark.
Okay, so it's quite different.
Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. And thanks, Adam, for the clarification around that performance outcome. I did confuse it with the uplift test. So I suppose in terms of mapped building heights and under our city plan and the desired sort of changes of the mapped heights, so in regards to specific outcomes, the 3.2.19, the number H around our deliberate anticipation of where heights change. And I suppose this is to the point of my question in that, there are a lot of higher buildings of this form over the road in the higher mapped area, but this is deliberately mapped lower. So I wonder how we are satisfying that number H, if we are erring on the side of, if we're leaning on the higher level, how we are not reinforcing the desired buffering down?
Through the chair, when we're considering the city plan as a whole, I'm not of the opinion that a 2-storey 9 metres to 3-storey 15 metres really constitutes an area where we're looking for a deliberate and abrupt building height change. That probably, to me, might be other areas of the city that might go from HX down to 3 storeys, where you're getting high rises next to dwelling houses. We're in a medium density residential zone here. It's contemplating some uplift provisions. So we know that the 2-storey 9 can get to 3 storeys and 13.5 metres, and the 3-storey 15 can get to 4.5 technically and 22.5 metres. So that's not a huge height difference to me. We're in an area that contemplates some increases in height and density. So I don't believe as this part of the city is really one of those parts where they were anticipating or had that provision H in to deal with deliberate and distinct building height changes.
Thank you. Last question, Chair. I just wonder if you could show the slide showing the sort of western facade. You had it there. And I wonder if officers, you know, I've read the report around the 4th level is not considered a story, but I wonder if you could just, there's obviously a lot, it looks like there's a lot of structure, and to the western neighbours, you know, they've made a submission, they feel it, the impacts of a story, of a level, they are feeling. I just wonder if you could just clarify why that is not considered a story.
Do we have a full plan of that story? Through the chair, under the story definition within city plan, there are some exclusionary provisions that if you only include certain aspects, they don't constitute a story. They are bathroom, storeroom, meter room, those type of things. So as you can see on this level, we've got 3 powder rooms, a large stairs that runs sort of top to bottom, and a lift, and a pergola that's not a roofed structure. So all those provisions that we've got on that rooftop there meet the story exclusionary provisions. So while we acknowledge that it does constitute building height, and it is something that the neighbours will see under the technical assessment against the city plan provisions, it doesn't constitute a story.
Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Doran.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like a quick query on the footprint site cover. That might be a good example there. The site cover taking into account not just call it the ground level where the car parking is, but is that also taking into account the cantilevered platform, if you like, for which the other 2 levels are built on? Is that the 56% that is outlined?
Through the chair, that's correct, yes.
Thank you. And I just want to also touch or pick up on part of the uplift test is its interface with its neighbours, and I probably have a little bit of trouble with the western neighbour in that the setback, is it compliant or is it performance-based compliance with setbacks on the neighbour's western boundary?
It's a huge wall.
In terms of AO compliance, in relation to the rooftop terrace, it's just a small portion of each of the lift shafts, which is within that AO compliant setback area. It's also important to note that that western boundary tapers away from the built form from north to south, so setbacks improve from north to south, and that lift shaft to the southernmost unit is AO compliant.
Did you take the view, or when you assess the rooftop as, you know, quite rightly within the 50% uplift, I'm not debating that, but in relation to the impact on the neighbours for the 50% uplift, whilst it's not a story, did you assess whether or not that last level, because of its back turn to the western neighbour, does appear as if it's quite a significant boundary on the western side?
Yes, officers did consider that as part of the assessment process, and I think from my perspective it was one of the key considerations for this. This is an example of the plans that were lodged in response to information request, so very little changed in terms of that western elevation, and that really, as mentioned earlier, presents a 13-metre sheer wall to that western neighbour. Through further advice, we were able to negotiate an improved outcome. So that included the recessing of that rooftop level and the opening up of that privacy screening, which in officers' view balances the requirements of built form as well as visual privacy for those western neighbours. So on balance, we've finalised our position that that's acceptable in terms of an amenity impact to that western neighbour.
So just one last question, Chair. So you mentioned this before about visual amenity. Is there any concerns around the noise impacts based on the fact that the 3 rooftops are essentially set up as entertainment spaces with the powder room and the facilities there, that the noise impact on the surrounding neighbours? Was there assessment done on that? And how did you arrive at that not being impactful enough to warrant recommendation?
Through the Chair, rooftop terraces, we acknowledge what you're talking about in terms of the potential acoustic concerns from there. We could have the same concerns with a similar development that have backyards. It's a residential use in a residential zone. We generally don't get acoustic reports for developments that are of residential nature within a residential zone. If they did have a communal open space area that was a concentrated, dedicated area for a larger development, we might have an acoustic report and some hours of operation on those areas. But for a scale of development at 3 multiple dwellings, we generally don't involve acoustic assessments.
Thank you.
I had a question. I was rereading the submissions on this one again last night, and there was concerns raised from the immediate neighbour, and a few other neighbours raised as well, but I'll take it as being from the immediate neighbour about the impact of noise from mechanical equipment associated with the pools, because you've got 2 pools down the side. So I know there would be a typical condition requiring that those mechanical items be acoustically treated, but is there a condition requiring any kind of acoustic treatment of the boundary fence between the 2 properties?
Through the Chair, I don't believe we have that condition specifically, but it would be a pretty quick exercise for us to find that condition wording, and we could have that imposed or suggested for councillors should they see fit to impose it between Planning Committee and full council.
All right. I might, I'll get some more advice on that, because it was raised. So it was raised in several submissions, but I'll take it as really it's from the immediate neighbour that should have the most concern with that.
Just to clarify, on page 511, we have a condition that's talking to screening of visually offensive components, and that includes service equipment. So we may have that covered through recommended condition 6.
We can dig in that a little bit further, because to me there's a difference between screening it and acoustically treating the mechanical equipment or the fence to reduce the impacts. If there was only 1 pool there, but when there is 2 of them, I could understand why maybe those neighbours would be concerned about an accumulation of impact, but that's something that could be conditioned further. There was also several submissions, but again, I'll take it from the direct neighbours as being the most impacted ones, about overlooking from the 4th level. Am I correct that looking at this one here, there can't be any overlooking to the western side because that is a solid wall? Is that accurate?
Through the Chair, I don't believe it's a solid wall, but we've got some, this might show it well, that western elevation there. There's some batten screening recessed in from the lift shafts that you can see there that's providing privacy for the neighbours. It previously was full height. We got them to remove some height of that to try and reduce the dominance of that upper level.
So, Adam, you mentioned it's recessed, so that would mean that from standing behind that, can they look into the next door property, or they'd only be able to look into, what would they be seeing from there?
Through the Chair, it's recessed in from the edge slightly on those rooftop terrace areas. I'm not sure of the height of the screening of that privacy fencing at the moment. I can't read it from the slide, but I don't think you'd be getting a full and unobstructed view down into the neighbours' properties from there.
Right. And Adam, on that same render in the below, I can see what looks like a glass balustrade. So you've got what would be a concrete form of the edge of the building, then I can see a glass balustrade. So to the neighbours to the east, it's not like you can walk right up against the edge of the concrete form and look over. You're actually set back a fair way by glass balustrade, is my read of the plans.
Through the chair, that's correct, and I think they've got a very big separation to the other side. If we go through there, yeah. So you're talking about glass balustrade on the balconies there, Councillor Hamill, or
It'd be about the balconies on the third story, and then from the roof structure, you can't go right to the edge. There's a balustrade set back in a fair way.
Yes, there would be a bit of a set in there to the balustrade.
Yeah. And then the distance from the edge of the building to the boundary, you got about is that 7 metres I can see in that measurement?
Yes, it's a very substantial distance there.
Okay.
7 metres is correct.
Would you mind clarifying too, we were talking about the setback on the western boundary before about what was AO. What is the AO setback for boundary in this?
So above 10.5 metres of building height, it's 2.5 metres. Well, it's 3 metres, sorry.
Okay, so they're compliant at the back, but because of the taper, it comes down to the front. So part of the building was compliant, part of the building wasn't compliant with the AO outcome.
Yes, that's correct.
Councillor Gates, question?
Just in regard to your questions there, that recessed piece of screening between the lift shafts, what's that constructed of, please?
Through the chair, just privacy battening. So it might be aluminium battens, vertical aluminium battens to provide some privacy screening.
Was there any consideration of having it with something more noise protecting, like masonry or whatever?
Through the chair, we were more interested in privacy and maintaining privacy from the neighbour as opposed to any acoustic issue you might be trying to achieve with a masonry type construction.
Okay.
Further question, Councillor Gates? Adam, would you mind going back, I think, to the very, very first slide in your slide deck, sorry. I know you wouldn't have done a site cover analysis of the surrounding buildings, but I was just interested in, keep going back if we can, please. I think it might be the very first slide in the presentation. That one there. So to the left of the screen, there's a couple duplexes down further that, to me, the site cover of those buildings looks like they would be above 56%. Did we do a site cover analysis of surrounding or only a height analysis? Just getting to Councillor Martin's point about slender and bulk, I'm just looking at those couple buildings down the street. They're on the same side. They look like big site covers. So do we have metrics on those?
Through the chair, we haven't got any of those metrics as part of the assessment of this application, but I can assure you if there was a development assessment undertaken on all of those, which it would have been for a dual occupancy, they all appear to be, which would be an accepted subject to requirements development application, we would have undertaken a site cover assessment.
Okay. I didn't have any further questions. Any other councillors have any questions for officers at this time? I'm happy to move the officer recommendation. Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Councillor O'Neill is happy to second it. I'll keep an opening very short so we can get into debate. I was very interested on this one that reading through the submissions of understanding what some of the concerns from the immediate neighbours and then the further out neighbours were concerned about. I am interested and will look to dig a little bit deeper before full council about the acoustic treatments that might be available to the pool mechanical and to any aircon mechanical, because I think that's a fair concern for those neighbours to have, and I'll look to that before full council to see if that condition can be tightened. I brought up the site cover one because I was interested when I was looking at that map that when we talk about slender and bulk form building or how the building is perceived by the community, I think if you drive down that street and see a couple of those duplexes down there, they take up a big chunk of the site. So to me, this building actually reads better from the street, that the way it's designed by it being set to the one side, still with a 3 metre setback and a 2 metre setback at the smallest point, it won't actually read from the road as taking up as much of the site as some of the duplexes in the street. I know there was concerns raised about that. I think we got an answer in the end that this would be the first building of this height on this side of the road. While I know that on a map it says one side of the road's 2 stories 9, the other side of the road's 3 stories 15, I think to the community, they drive down the street, are they really going to see a massive difference between one side of the road being at 15, the other side of the road being at 13? Like, what's the impact of that additional height? I think it's negligible in this circumstance that you end up with 3 very high class dwellings. I suspect that what they'll come out as, with rooftop amenity up on top. If it was a common communal area up on the roof, I think it'd be very different. If this was envisaged that everyone was going to congregate in the roof, that you could have a lot of people up there, that you could have a big group up on the roof, especially if there would have been things for like pools up on roofs, I would have said we should definitely be looking at a different option. But when it is just private space up on the roof for each of the residents, I'm not sure that we've hit a benchmark of it causing an impact on the community that we should be concerned about. I am comfortable to support this today. I think we just focused on a little bit. I know there's been a bit of talk about that 13-metre wall. I could understand the concerns on that side, and it's difficult because the renders for that side, like you can't actually see the battens of where they are. So I could understand if the immediate neighbour decides to possibly pursue this through appeal and may want to see specific outcomes in that treatment might be different. But in terms of what they raise and their objection to it, as of right, you can go build a 9-metre high building here, and you could actually build it closer to the boundary than what the setback requirement for this is. You could be 1.5 metres away if you were just building a single dwelling in this location. Again, the impact difference between a 9-metre high building being 1.5 metres away versus a 13-metre building that's 2 to 3 metres away, I don't know what impact that creates in the neighbours, apart from visual amenity, which I said if there is changes that they'd like to propose, if they choose appeal, that in terms of the facade finishes or what the battens are made out of, I could understand why they may wish to do that. I'm comfortable to support this today, and we'll put the motion out there for someone to speak against. Councillor Young first.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I can't support it. I think it's a very attractive looking building, there's no doubt about it. But from my point of view, it's just on the wrong side of the street. It should be north of TALLEBUDGERA Drive in the other precinct, which is deliberately been identified for a higher style of building. We've defined that in the city plan. There's a precinct where we've sought to achieve an objective, and this is on the wrong side of the road. I appreciate how the officers have achieved some mitigation of the possible detrimental impacts. If this is to get approved, I mean, you'd really want to be looking at replacing those battens on the top floor. I call it the 4th floor, because they're just 50 mil aluminium battens with 50 mil spacing, so you've just got 50% coverage, shall we say, and that's going to be a noise emanating position. And it's not like you've got one property where you might have one property owner having a party once a week. You've got 3 property owners that might have a party once a week, so the possibility of activity in that top section is higher, given that there are 3 dwellings. As I said, very high quality, lovely building, but wrong spot. Thanks, Chair.
Speaker for the motion. Councillor Gates.
Chairman, I'd like to support it, but I would like to ask whether officers could communicate with the applicant or the consultant about replacing that screening on the top level with masonry walls. And I'll support it today, but my decision at full council will depend on whether that can occur. I'm not satisfied that gives protection to the neighbouring property for the reasons that Councillor Young too has outlined. The fact that there are 3 separate dwellings, and if entertainment was occurring at multiple dwellings on consecutive nights or whatever, it will have an impact on the neighbouring Western property owner. It is a very attractive building. I was a little surprised that the 3rd floor wasn't recessed a little in order to get the uplift, but overall I agree that it's not a huge difference having this on the opposite side of the street. I would also like to know, though, whether there is an intent for uplift review as part of the city plan of this stretch, because it is in the medium density zone, and that's potentially something that we could look at as well. So I'll support it today.
And Mick will take that on notice of a suggested condition that gets us to where we need to be for Councillor Gates before Council. Councillor Martin, speak against.
Thanks, Chair. And I would agree it's an attractive looking design building, and I was loath to request it to come to committee, and I want to thank officers for attempting to work with the applicant to reduce the impact on that rooftop level and the building, but ultimately I wasn't satisfied it did, which is why I'll be voting against. I think the issue here is the reasonable expectations of the neighbours in the local area and reinforcing that local context. Granted, there's the 50% uplift, and I think in a 2-storey zone that gives the opportunity for a maximum uplift of 1 storey, and I think here the presence of the rooftop structures is just beyond the reasonable expectations or the well-managed interface with the neighbours. And the presence of that in the application, I think our eyes are drawn to that recessive top level, but it's actually the 3rd level, which is the impact level, that should be the recessive. It should have that human scale at the street edge. It should be recessed in, and I think that's reinforced by we've seen examples, and granted the surrounding area has a higher level because it has a higher mapped area and a higher density area, but in this zone, you know, the examples that we've seen of what is the higher density examples in this area there's examples there where they are the 2 floors plus a 3rd, which is tapering in. Chair, I would disagree in the local context in that neighbours wouldn't notice, because the building form in this area that is, and those ones you pointed to the west, the dual locks, are actually 2-storey, and the community will notice, you know, perhaps they wouldn't notice a tapered 3rd storey, but I think they'll certainly notice a 3rd storey plus a tapered 4th level. And I think, you know, the comments around flood, yes, there are flood overlay impacts. You know, the DFL, I think, is an 800 odd mil above natural ground. And most new buildings in this area have dealt with that by simply raising the floor level of a dual occupancy. There's a garage at the front, which can be inundated, and they are, you know, a metre above or 900 above the ground, and then they're 2-storey and maybe a 3rd tapered in. So I think a lot of that points to what is appropriate in this zone, given that we're outside of site cover density and height, would have been a dual occupancy with perhaps a 3rd storey tapered in. I think the western and southern interface are most impactful on the community. Granted that at a street level, that tapered in wouldn't impact so much, and the building is set very far west to allow for that battle axe driveway. And again, that reinforces, you know, we are pushing the impact to one side. If it were a duplex, which I think it's appropriately zoned for, those garages would be out the front and perhaps battened and screened. And I think most importantly for me, this is a landmark application. There are no other that are 3+1, 3+ are entertaining. There are in other areas that are mapped for it. I think we need to stay true to the mapped height intent. You know, I acknowledge officers' view that it's not a HX versus height unlimited versus a 3-storey, but I think we still have an obligation to have a gradual tapering down, and I don't think by approving this, I think we are leaning on a other mapped area that is generally in the vicinity. So I think we should have stayed true. So for all of those reasons, Chair, I'll be voting against today.
Speaker for the motion. I'll close debate very briefly. Question, Councillor Young.
I thought before you take the vote, maybe Councillor Martin would like to foreshadow refusal, so we're not left in a hung position.
So you took me to where I was going to get to, is that we're in a bit of a precarious position that I'm not so confident which way this is going to go, and there's nothing on the floor behind this. So if you've got something up your sleeve, Councillor Martin, you have left it to the very last moment to introduce it.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Councillor. I would like to foreshadow a refusal, and if you'd like me to specify which outcomes now, I can do that.
We need to have it there, otherwise we've got nothing to fall to.
Yeah, I think I'll foreshadow a refusal that the development application fails to satisfy specific outcome 3.3.2.19.
So, Councillor, I'm guessing you have this in writing. Have you provided it? Could you look at the chamber support, possibly?
Happy to do. Yeah. If we can take a quick break, I'm happy to provide that.
We'll adjourn and let Councillor Martin get the foreshadowed up with chamber support. Meeting adjourned 10:53.
So what do we got?
Councillors, thank you very much for that indulgence where we allowed Councillor Martin just to work up a foreshadowed motion. I think it's important we have something on the table just in case the motion that's currently on the floor isn't successful. Councillor Martin, we're just going to park it there for now, and if the motion that has been debated and I was just about to close on isn't successful, we'll come to a foreshadowed motion. Okay, so that takes us back to this substantive motion, of which I was just about to close debate on this one. I wanted to close by acknowledging that I thought there was some good questions and some good input during debate and questions with officers on how this building would be read by the local community and what the impacts of this proposal would be in the local community. It's always interesting when you get out of 2D planning, which is colours and lines and a map that says one side of the road's this and one side of the road's that, but then put it in a context of what's the actual impact on the community. What does this proposal achieve of impact on direct neighbours, but then more broadly in the area? And then I think rightly what Councillor Martin is alluding to is the first one maybe, but what's the cumulative impact in the longer term, which I think is why Councillor Gates' point about these kind of matters being mopped up in the new planning scheme is important. I'm going to continue to support this one today. I do think that through reading the information requests on this one and reading the submissions again last night on this application, that there's been a considerable amount of work put in by the applicant and officers to get this proposal to a really good outcome. 56% site cover is not ridiculous. Like, we see bigger site coverages, and I'm very confident there are duplexes just down the road from me with bigger site coverage. Typically, I think what we would see, if there was a bigger site coverage on the ground floor, we would rightly expect the third story to be recessed. But when it's 56% at the greatest and it goes up, I'm fairly confident the impact of that is not considerable. Setback-wise, I make the point again that if someone was demolishing this existing building and building a single dwelling, they could be set back off the boundary a metre. I don't even think it's 1.5 metres. They could be a metre off the boundary. This proposal at the smallest pinch point is 2 metres, and that very quickly expands out to 3 metres at the rear. So I actually think there's an improved setback outcome versus what a duplex or a single dwelling could have delivered. I do have some concerns, and before full council will interrogate further around the acoustic treatment of mechanical equipment with outside pools. Again, that's something in the new planning scheme that possibly some stronger set conditions around not just how you not just how you screen that equipment, but the acoustics of it, because that recreational area next door to someone's living area or bedroom, we should make sure we've got strong acoustic outcomes. I welcome Councillor Gates's input in terms of before full council seeking some wording that may see some changes made to the batten screening up on the top level to improve privacy further and possibly improve acoustic outcomes. All in all, but I believe this is a highly desirable site. We know why everyone wants to be in Palm Beach. We've got a site where they can achieve 3 good dwellings set in the right orientation. It is a good-looking building, and I don't see anything in terms of major impacts of why this application should be refused, and would put it to you all that it should be supported here today. I will close debate with that and take the vote on the matter. All those in favour? Division is called. In favour is Councillor Hamill, Councillor Gates, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Dora and Councillor O'Neill. Against, Councillor Young, Councillor Fowler, Councillor Martin. Would you like your name recorded, Councillor Martin?
Yes, please, Chair.
I've recorded Councillor Martin as voting against. Sorry, it was already division. That's right, it'll all be recorded. Councillors, that deals with item 6.4. We will move on to item 6.5. We wish Councillor Martin a enjoyable break as he's going to step out of the room on this one.
See you later.
Yeah, straight after he drags us on the other one. Welcome, Brock in the Miami vibe. Brock, presentation when you're ready.
So easy. Through the chair, good morning, councillors. I'm here today to present to you a request by Newcrush to extend the operating period of the Oxenford Quarry in accordance with the 1992 rezoning agreement. The report before you also considers related requirements about compliance with the rezoning agreement and a request by Newcrush to alter the current blasting methodology of 3 future blast events to trial the use of electronic detonators. Okay. The subject site is located at 33 Maudslin Road, Oxenford, and is improved by the existing Oxenford Quarry. The Oxenford Quarry is located centrally within the suburb of Oxenford. The site is immediately surrounded by open space areas and the Coomera River, and more broadly, residential properties in all directions. The nearest residential property is approximately 250 metres to the east of the existing operations on site. The subject site is identified in the state's key resource area for hard rock quarry materials. The site is also predominantly located within the extractive industry zone of city plan, and also there are other parts of the site that are also located in the open space and emerging communities
Excuse me,
zone.
Chairman. I'm really sorry to interrupt, but the last time we considered a new crush application, it was about the appeal and there were no consultants listed. I have participated in meetings leading up to this meeting today, but I have obviously been mistaken in not recognising that Planet Consulting is still a consultant. I had been informed they were no longer a consultant, but they were a consultant with the original application and I had a conflict of interest. I want to just check with members of the committee today. I have no conflicts within the relevant term, but I did accept donations from Planet Consulting historically, and I'm not quite sure. I was not part of the original decision that was made, and I feel compelled now to bring it to everyone's attention that that is the situation. There's been numerous occasions in the last term where I have indicated that I have no relevant term conflicts, and councillors have supported my staying in, but I need to know whether I should go and get the conflict details and present them today or not.
First of all, I think we need to make the point you could not have been aware of it until it was actually in a report. So the fact you participated in meetings beforehand, if you can't raise a conflict of something you're not aware of, so I think you're very comfortable there. It would be appropriate, Councillor Gates, given the history of this one, how long it goes back, that when this first kicked off, you did have a conflict was in a relevant term, but now it's not, which makes it slightly different to how we've been dealing with it recently, where it's a fresh application outside the relevant term and we've drawn a line in the sand. So I might leave it with you, like, if you said, I really want to go get the details and put it on the record properly, given it's this application and the history, we'll take a break and you go get those details and we'll resume.
I think that would probably be the best course of action. I'm so sorry to do this, but I only just realised when I saw that list right now, because I thought I was well across this item, having attended the briefing. So,
Councillor Gates, I think it is in everyone's best interest, and especially on this item, that we don't leave any gaps. So we're going to take a quick 3-minute break while Councillor Gates runs upstairs and gets those conflict details, and we'll deal with that issue, and then we'll back on from there. So adjourn the meeting. Councillors, viewers, thank you for the short break while we allowed Councillor Gates just to grab some details from her office. Councillor Gates, over to you for a declarable conflict of interest.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I simply wanted to make a declaration that in 2014 and 2015 I received donations from Planet, who I think were the it says planning consultant. I thought they were the landscape consultant originally, but anyway, I received those two donations there 10 and 11 years ago, and I've had no contact with the applicant or the consultant in the period between the application being lodged and now. So I'm seeking Council's approval, the committee's approval, to remain in the room and participate in the decision.
So I'm happy to move a procedural motion. I would like to add into that procedural motion, but that we acknowledge that the donations are outside the relevant term. So if we can add that, the rest of it is very good. I just want to add in there somewhere that the donation is outside the relevant term.
Okay.
Don't be sorry. I'd prefer that we picked up on now and deal with it. Councillor O'Neill is happy to second that. Now, can I ask, before I speak to that procedural motion quickly, does anyone have any questions on this conflict of interest for Councillor Gates? All right, so I'm just quickly going to explain why I'm happy to move this procedural motion today. It is rare that we have an application that goes over this long of a period, and the appeal process goes over this long of a period, so we don't deal with this particularly regularly. At the original decision back in 2021, these donations were within inside the relevant term still, and Councillor Gates chose not to participate in the decision, which was absolutely the right thing to do at the time. For me, there's a very big contextual difference between being in the room for the decision substantive back in 2021 and now being in the room today as a decision as part of granting or possibly granting an extension while an appeal is continuing on. I think contextually they're completely different. So I'm very comfortable that, because it's outside the relevant term, that it is a different decision than the original one, and that the public interest is definitely served in the former Deputy Mayor and representative for a large part of this area over a long period being in the room to contribute. I'm comfortable with that procedural motion and that being the case today. Councillor Gates.
Thank you, Chairman. I just think for complete clarity I should make everyone aware that there was a donation also in 2016, but it was fully refunded, and the legal position has been that that just is irrelevant now and not counted. So it did represent a prescribed interest, which was why I was not in the room for the original decision.
Can I check again, just after I've given that my reasons for procedural motion supporting it? Does any councillor wish to, on the public record, ask a question or raise a concern with that? Now's your chance to air it on the public record. In that case, I'll take the vote in the procedural motion. All those in favour? Councillor Hamill, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Dora and Councillor O'Neill. Please recall that Councillor Young and Councillor Fowler. Okay, I'll recast it again. All those in favour of the procedural motion? Councillor Hamill, Councillor Dora and Councillor O'Neill. Against? Abstaining? Please recall that Councillor Patterson has abstained. And then we need to record move those to did not, move Councillor Fowler and Councillor Young to did not vote. Now, I need to check something here, because I don't know if only 3 people voting on the matter substitutes. Do I have a quorum problem on that, Councillor Gates? Enough people?
I may vote, but I need clarification first on another matter. If you abstain, it's negative. I'm not abstaining.
Yeah, sorry, councillors. Yep. Yeah, so.
I think I have a conflict, so I need to raise it.
Okay, so that's new information, so let's tease out the conflict concern from Councillor Patterson first.
This has only just come to my attention when I looked at this with when Councillor Gates raised it. And I want to explore this with the committee because I'm not quite sure whether I have a conflict or not. One of the people noted as a registered lobbyist on this is Mr. Graham Stark. Now, many councillors here, I believe, would have had coffees and chats with various people, lobbyists, including Mr. Stark. The distinction, though, is Graham did attend a party at my house. So I haven't considered the conflict. So I'm not even sure whether I'm declaring. I just want to open it up and get some consideration and some thoughts from others. Thank you.
So the fact that Mr. Stark attended a party at your house, to me, isn't a trigger. It's if you consider Mr. Stark a close personal friend or have a close personal relationship with him. So that's a distinction that you need to make. If you think he's a close personal friend, then you need to make that declaration. But then we'll have to ask, what was Mr. Stark's involvement with this application?
Okay, I'll do that. I'll declare that.
Okay.
Then that's cleaner.
So if I just need to confirm first exactly what his involvement is in this first.
He's a registered lobbyist.
Yeah. On behalf of the applicant.
The applicant.
Okay. So.
I'm in.
Right. So, Councillor Patterson, you intend to raise a conflict in regards to Mr. Stark?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I can do.
We're going to make that decision.
I don't know whether it's prescribed. Is it prescribed?
We don't have prescribed anymore.
Pardon?
We're going to say it's declarable, and then you can either decide to leave or not.
I'd like some advice on this before I do this.
Councillor Young.
Thanks. So was he invited to your place?
Yeah, I invited him.
Were a lot of people invited? Were there 5 people there or 55?
So
no, there was about 60 people there.
Councillors, this is the same. It invites them to a wedding. Like, it's for the council to decide.
No, but we have had advice on that, and the advice, if you're invited to a wedding, is it's not defined unless you're in the wedding party. And when that advice was provided last time, it's not if you're invited to a group party, it's not if you're even invited to a wedding, but if you're a member of the wedding party, then that is defined as close personal friend and prescribed.
I seem to remember it being you that raised it last time as well. So you need to decide if Mr. Stark is a close personal friend or not. And if you're declaring he is, then you're out of the room. So you can't just leave the room. We need a conflict on the record. So if you're choosing to raise a conflict and to say that he's a close personal friend,
because he didn't
then
do
you're out.
prescribed.
Yes, he did.
He did declarable.
No, he did prescribe.
No, he didn't. Did Councillor Martin do prescribed?
No, he did declarable, voluntary, chose to leave the room.
For a personal close friend. So what's the difference?
I think the personal relationship was a prescribed.
Sorry, what did Councillor Martin do?
But the definition of that is
Okay. So he did declarable because he wasn't he voluntarily chose to do it.
Yeah, so I'll do that too.
Right. So we're going to need to get those details in the record book.
So,
this is a new conflict.
Declarable conflict of interest. Where are we? The name of the related party is Graham Stark. The nature of the relationship is personal friend. The nature of the related party's interest in the matter is registered lobbyist. So that's for that part. And further down, no, we don't need that, right? I'm voluntarily deciding to not participate in the matter, and then I'll get advice on this for further things. Thank you.
councillors, that is going to require me to have to adjourn the meeting and get some advice, because my understanding would be is that I don't have a quorum now that can vote on the matter. Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Chair. My understanding is you don't need a quorum to vote on a conflict, but we should get that.
So voting on conflicts is one thing. I'm actually thinking the substantive matter, that she's voluntarily decided to leave, so the conflict's done. I'm more on the substantive matter, that I think that only leaves three people who can vote on the matter now, which may be a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just need to check that there's not a problem with that, because they're not.
Yeah. So you've got a quorum. The thing that's affected is probably the voting on the earlier conflicts. You want to review that, perhaps? Taking.
My understanding is on the previous conflict, Councillor Gates' conflict, you don't need a quorum to make that decision. That's my understanding.
But I voted on at the start of the meeting on Councillor Young and Councillor Fowler's conflict of interest declarations when I should not have, because I had one myself.
Right.
And now Councillor Patterson is in the same situation. So
what we're going to do is recast all of them so that we have a clean bill of sheet on them. I don't see any other way to do it.
I'll change my wording.
Okay, so my intent is, given that messiness of having two councillors and ample conflicts in the record of voting on previous conflicts, is we're just going to recast all the conflict of interest declarations. Again, the two councillors have chosen to leave the room or out of the room is fine. So we will redo Councillor Fowler, Councillor Young's and Councillor Gates's conflict of interest, just the vote on them, so that we have a fresh conflict on the record with the people who should have been able to vote on the matter there. Can I ask for the record, does anyone have a concern with that or a different path forward? Because I don't see one that's any less messy than that. Okay.
Can I just have a minute, because I'm going to change my declaration, the wording, and I'll send it to the Chamber support. Please, Chair. Sorry.
That's all right. We'll just send it through, Councillor Young. Taking too many now.
doesn't matter. Why what? I've found the relevant section. Procedure if no quorum for deciding a matter because of prescribed conflicts of interest or declarable conflicts of interest. The section applies if a matter in which one or more councillors have conflicts, there is less than a quorum remaining. Do you want to do this in open? Okay. The local government must do one of the following. A, delegate deciding the matter under section 257 unless the matter cannot be delegated under that section. Decide by resolution to defer the matter to a later meeting, so we could defer to full council. Decide by resolution not to decide the matter and take no further action in relation to the matter unless this act or another act provides that the local government must decide the matter.
So
we could defer it to full council.
We could. We have we have allowed, and assuming the conflicts are voted on the same way, you all have your voting rights. Still, if we had a situation where any of you were conditioned that you couldn't vote, we'd have a quorum problem. But because I believe you'll also be able to vote, I'm of more of an interest to deal with it today, mainly because I think that would be particularly unkind to the divisional councillor to have drag this on for this much time and for the community input on this to then defer it. So unless there is a really strong feeling that you don't wish to deal with this today, I would like to press ahead with my pathway of recasting the vote on Councillor Gates, Councillor Fowler, Councillor Young's conflict of interest, so that we can deal with the matter today. Anyone have a problem with that? In that case, whose do we have locked and loaded to deal with first?
Councillor Fowler.
Councillor Fowler, so we're not changing the words at all, and I'm happy to move the same procedural motion I did before. I believe Councillor Gates might have seconded last time, so we will adjust the seconder to someone who can second, which Councillor Doran's hand has gone up first. It's the exact same procedural motion as before. All those in favour? You can't vote. Councillor Gates, don't trip us up.
Sorry, I'm still reading the
That's all right. So Councillor Hamill, Councillor Doran, Councillor O'Neill. Procedural motion is carried. We'll then go to Councillor Young's next for the declarable conflict of interest.
Thanks, Chair. The wording of mine has changed because there was a bit of confusion this morning. It was still correct, but this is more correct, and this is the wording used in a previous declaration in 2020. So my reasons are, or my conflict of interest is that New Crush are the owners of the Oxenford Quarry. They've submitted a DA to council. The property they own and where I live is at the closest point within 700 metres of the existing and proposed expanded quarry. My house itself is approximately 1.1 kilometres from the quarry and is impacted by the effects of blasting undertaken at the quarry, both air shock and ground vibration. I'm seeking consent of council to participate in the vote and discussion on the matter because of my long-standing property ownership, my representation of part of the community directly affected by the operations of the quarry, and my understanding of all of the matters over history.
Councillor Young, even with the change of wording, I'm happy to move the same procedural motion still. Councillor Doran, you did second last time. Are you happy to do that again? Any concerns to raise? That being the case of no, we'll take the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Hamill, Councillor Doran, Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Gates, we'll recast yours now.
Declare that I received donations from Planet, who are the planning consultant to the project, in 2014 in the amount of $1,560, and in 2015 $1,850. I've had no contact with the applicant nor with any of the consultants since the original decision, and certainly not about this matter. So I'm seeking to remain in the room and participate in the decision.
Okay, so I'm happy to move the procedural motion again. Councillor O'Neill, are you happy to second still? So we'll just adjust the voting there and we'll take the vote on that procedural motion. All those in favour? Councillor Hamill, Doran and O'Neill. And we've adjusted the voting patterns. So we've recast the three declarable conflicts of interest. Councillor Patterson and Councillor Martin have both chosen to voluntarily leave the room, which has us sorted there. And unless our lawyer friend's about to walk back in and cause me trouble, we'll get back into the presentation. You didn't hear me. Unless my lawyer friend is about to run into the room and cause me trouble, we'll continue with the presentation. No, I'll take that as we're good to go. Back to you, Brock. Yeah, they're still on the record.
Rightio.
I still think close associates.
Keep going. Wait. Right.
Sorry, it's not clear yet. How long do you get the official advice?
I can.
This item is going to be left on the table for now. We're going to move on to the next item, and if the legal advice can come back before we get back to it, then we'll deal with it at the end of the meeting. So the item is left on the table, and we'll move to item 6.6 for now. For anyone who happens to watch this tape back later and wonder what is going on, it is unusual that we have so many councillors with a conflict on a matter at a committee, either that have to leave the room or have had a declarable conflict of interest. So we were just getting some legal advice to make sure that only having 3 councillors who can vote on a conflict of interest matter isn't a problem. So what I have done for now is left that item on the table. So our intent is to come back and deal with it later on. We're going to go to item 6.6, and as long as we can get some clear direction from our legal team before we come back to that item, we'll deal with it today. If we can't get that clear legal advice, we may have no choice but to defer the item to full council. So we're at item 6.6. Officers, good morning to you. We'll take the presentation, please.
Through the Chair. Good morning, councillors. This application is for another change to a development permit for a material change of use for 17 units at 88 The Esplanade, Burley Heads. The change is subject to impact assessment. The site has an area of 809 square metres and 2 frontages, being the Esplanade to the east and 2nd Avenue to the west. It's identified within the high-density residential zone and has a building height overlay of 53 metres. Notable features in the local context include the beachfront and Oceanway immediately opposite, Gold Coast Highway to the west, Burleigh Town Centre to the south, and the future 2nd Avenue Light Rail Station, which is currently under construction. The change application relates to a code tower approval, which has a height of 53 metres and 17 stories. In June 2024, a minor change was approved to amend the apartment yield from 2 units per floor to 1 unit per floor, reducing the overall yield from 30 units to 16. The change also removed 1 level of basement parking. In December 2024, another minor change was approved to the code tower. The key changes related to an amended tower appearance, reconfiguration of the communal open space at the ground floor, and amendments to better accommodate the fire egress stairs and pad mount transformer. This change request seeks to increase the building height of the current approval from 53 metres and 17 stories to 62.1 metres and 19 stories, triggering impact assessment as the proposal exceeded the mapped height of 53 metres. The change relates to the introduction of a 2-storey penthouse only and does not seek any amendments to the podium or tower form. The proposal comprises a total of 17 4-bedroom units. The development will maintain the approved tower side and rear setbacks of 3.1 to 4 metres to the north and 3.8 to 4 metres to the west. Tower base site cover of 81.3%, tower site cover of 54.4%, and 53 parking spaces comprising of 49 residential spaces and 4 visitor spaces. Waste collection will continue to occur on street from 2nd Avenue, consistent with other tower approvals. This plan shows the first level of a penthouse apartment at level 17. It includes a large living area, 2 ensuites, a study, and a cinema room. This plan shows the 2nd floor of the penthouse apartment at level 18. It includes 2 ensuites, a lounge area, and private open space comprising a pool, dining area, and lounge. During public notification, 52 submissions were received. 51 were properly made and 1 was not properly made. The key matters raised were height, view obstructions and shadowing, amenity impacts, density and traffic, and a lack of affordable housing. Officers are satisfied the proposal has addressed these concerns in relation to compliance with City Plan benchmarks. A key consideration of the application was building height, where the proposal seeks a 17% uplift above the code height. City officers are satisfied the proposed development complies with the 50% uplift criteria identified within the urban neighbourhoods element. The proposal reinforces local identity. There are several developments in the local area which are above 53 metres, including the western joining tower, which is 33 stories. The proposal provides a well-managed interface. It achieves appropriate building separation and provides a well-modulated facade. The proposal achieves an excellent standard of appearance by utilising a curved and tapered walls, express slab edges, and high-quality materials and finishes. The penthouse achieves an attractive design and includes a lightweight floating cap, promoting a varied, ordered and interesting skyline. The development also promotes housing choice in the context of this coastal locality by introducing an additional unit. Officers are also supportive of the height and setbacks as the proposal is responsive to the specific site circumstances. The site is adjoined by a single large allotment with an area greater than 3,000 square metres and subject to an established tower. As shown in the figure, the western adjoining development has a private open space which sits directly north of the subject site. As also illustrated in the figure, the resulting side and rear setbacks achieve building separations of 28 metres to the future tower which is under construction at 96 the Esplanade and 18 metres to the western adjoining tower. These building separations promote a sense of openness around the building and allows for a reasonable outlook, natural light and ventilation. Overall, the development is considered to maintain an appropriate level of amenity for adjoining residents expected within the high-density residential zone. Officers therefore recommend the application be approved, subject to conditions.
Councillors, questions for officers? Councillor Young.
Thanks, Chair. Again, another excellent looking building, but I have concerns because this was originally in a different form, refused by the council and subsequently approved by court. So I wonder if you might be able to refresh our memories as to why we refused it the first time round. Is that in the report? I didn't see it.
I don't believe the actual reasons are. So my understanding is that officers did recommend approval, however it was recommended for refusal at full council, and that was based on non-compliance with the high density residential zone code and the high-rise accommodation code in relation to the setbacks and site cover.
So a number of reasons there. And so those reasons still stand. Setbacks, conflict with the zone.
Through the chair, so that ruling was overturned through the Planning Environmental Court.
I understand that, yeah. I don't have any more questions. Thanks, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Gates, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Patterson, Councillor Gates. I do apologise. It's just a bit hard to hear officers. Yep. Sorry, Councillor, do you have any further questions? Mick, sorry, were you looking to contribute on that response? Nothing further. Cool, just checking. Councillor Fowler, question?
Thank you, Chair. And through you, were there any conditions or changes to the building design through the court process, additional conditions that were imposed on the applicant?
Through the Chair, I'm not too sure about specific conditions, but in terms of the building designs, I do believe there were a few amendments to setbacks slightly to the western side and the northern side, which adjoin the other two lots, and I believe there were some additional screening elements included.
I just have a question, and I'm not sure whether city officers can answer this, but why, just on timing, why would the applicant not seek approval for the additional unit and increased height during the court process? Why have they waited until the appeal process has finished and then come back to council to then try and add more on?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the court order was a couple of years ago at least. I don't have it in front of me, but the applicant, I don't know why they didn't do it during the court process, but they've got a right to lodge an application now, and that's what they've done. So I can't explain the applicant's motives, sorry.
Further questions, Councillor Fowler?
I just had a comment, if you'd allow it, Chair.
If you wouldn't mind letting finish questions first, then we'll go to debate, just so we can keep things moving to hopefully get us back to our other item. Other questions? Councillor Martin?
Thanks, Chair. On the increase of 2 stories, we've obviously got the addition of a penthouse. You know, we're going from I think 16 to 17 units. Could you clarify? So is there any additional parking for that additional dwelling?
Through the chair, there's no additional parking proposed, but they do comply with the acceptable outcome of the Transport Code. So they're required to supply 34 resident spaces, but they provide 49.
And in terms of, so I'm interested in the setback to the northern interface. So obviously, you had it on screen there, but there's the neighbouring tower behind, I think, has its pool in the northern site. So I read in the report, that where officers have really highlighted that 28-metre distance. But I'm probably more interested in the separation, the setback just to the boundary. And does that, if there were ever to be an application of that other land site where the pool is, does that compromise the distance if we were to, essentially be the same separation? I wonder if you could just explain the setback and how, whether a similar setback at that adjoining middle site could be built.
Through the chair, currently the setbacks are responsive to the existing site circumstances. So that tower to the west, it's all one allotment with that private open space. So, if that were to be subdivided in the future, that could I'm not too sure what the assessment would be, but at the moment there is no tower then, it's all one single lot.
Could you just clarify the setback to the boundary, please, for me?
The tower setback?
Yeah, the outermost point of the application to the boundary on the northern setback.
Yeah, for the tower form, it's 3.1 metres as a pinch point, and then it goes into 4 metres.
And Chair, if I could just clarify, that at the AO there would be 4 metres at the upper levels.
Through the chair, it kind of has that podium design, so it changes along, but because it doesn't comply with the AO, so it's a performance-based outcome.
And so just to clarify, this design, there are no staggering in at the northern and southern interfaces. It does, I think, on the eastern side, but there's no gradual tapering.
Not for this tower form.
Chair, and if I could just clarify, so they obviously had the code approval, which I acknowledge there's been some history there, but through this new application is the impact application. Often when we're seeking the uplift, this is an uplift provision. We're looking at what are the other elements that have improved. We've seen other applications where increased landscaping or power or other elements to soften that to justify the higher level. Has anything improved with the additional 2 stories? Has any of the boundaries come in, or has there been any increase in landscaping or anything else that would help support the uplift?
Through the chair, there haven't been any amendments to the actual podium or the tower setbacks, but in this instance, we're satisfied that it is a good outcome, and we're confident that it does comply with those 50% uplift criteria, so we haven't sought any changes.
So if I could I just clarify that? So if I'm just understanding that right, in that when we typically look at the uplift, we're looking for that extra excellent standard of appearance and design. So is what you're saying is at a code level, officers already consider that's there, so that's why there's no additional changes?
Through the chair, yes.
But it's not, because this building's already under construction as the code, so it hasn't been that it's already under construction. Officers still have that view?
Through the chair, yes.
Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Martin, if I could pick up the point I think you were trying to put down a little bit, would it be we don't typically deal with too many of these where the other change happens after a court appeal process. Normally we're dealing with one where there's been a code application, then they put the other change in. So does that make a difference that I think a lot of the things that typically we would see improved from the code to the other change have already been teased out through the court process? Things like built form and landscaping and articulation, a lot of that has already been occurred during the appeal process, hence why there probably wasn't a lot of change from officers.
Mr. Chair, for this particular proposal, that court process and all the ADR meetings that we had did result in, I would say, improvements to the building to satisfy the experts on both sides. So I think there was definitely improvements made from the code DA that the council refused to a point where it got to be both parties agreed it should be approved. And I think this particular proposal, the starting position is pretty good. It's a good looking building. I think it's got all those attributes that would have ticked the height uplift test anyway. So it's not that there's anything in the test that says the impact accessible application must be different and better from the original proposal.
I was just there. I very much understood what you were suggesting, Councillor Martin, and most of the time I think it's because we're dealing with a code approval and then straight to the other change, and there's a chance for officers to normally improve things, but this one isn't typical where it's had code, gone through appeal, had a lot of work done to it, and then come in on the top of it. But I appreciate the point you were suggesting. Did you have any more questions?
Just for you, Chair, I suppose, on that, I mean, it's hard to say, I suppose, but through that ADR process, you know, had this application come through at that time for the additional 2 levels, you're right, it's quite strange to go through that ADR and then do another other. I'm not sure if there's any legal advice around how that would have affected that additional ADR process had the full additional levels been assessed at the time.
Yeah. Good question, and one we won't get an answer to because it's a big hypothetical, but agreed, it's a unique pathway this one has taken, and the fact, you know, they're coming up out of the ground as this process goes on, but a bit unique, but we are where we are. Councillor O'Neill, did you have any questions on this one? Councillor Doran? Councillor Marshall? Just checking. A little bit. Okay. If there's no other questions from officers, we'd seek a mover for the item. I'm happy to move the item, seek a seconder. Councillor Doran, thank you. I'm going to speak to it very briefly so we can get back to the other item. Just to make the point, this is a bit of a unique pathway this one has been through, to have gone code and then gone through a very lengthy appeal process, and it was a very lengthy appeal process which saw a lot of changes occur. While it is a unique pathway, it is a legal pathway, and I want to really emphasise that point, that there's nothing stopping the applicant from taking the choice to have lodged this other change application seeking to add the extra height on top. It is 17%, and I actually think that's a good outcome because, as officers noted, there is an oversupply of car parking in this building, so they could have gone for more and had enough car parking to meet the AO. So as it currently stands, for this, with the additional height, they would have only had to provide 34 car parks, and they've provided 49. So they could have gone for more height and been compliant with car parking, which would have been a concern. They've chosen to only go for 17% and still keep an oversupply of car parking because they've obviously got a target market in mind that are going to demand more car parking per unit than what the AO calls for. It is a unique site, and the one contextual map showed that you've got the large pool as part of the tower next door, which gives a 28-metre separation to the western tower and an 18-metre separation to the tower at the back. The setbacks, while small at pinch point at 3.1, for most of the building, including the articulation, you get closer to that 4-metre mark, which is a good outcome, but I acknowledge Councillor Martin's point about, is there any repercussions of that for a tower next door in the future? I'd like to think the way this one has been designed with fairly generous articulation and whatnot, that a tower could be designed next door to complement it. Overall, I agree with Mick's comments. While I'm not an architect by any stretch of the imagination, I think we've definitely seen buildings that don't look like this get approval and get built. And while they're only renders, if it can deliver on its outcome, hopefully we've seen on a fairly prominent corner site a really good tower built. For all those reasons, I believe this one should be supported today, and the officer recommendation supported. Speaker against the motion, Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. What I'd say is I acknowledge this is high density, and you know, we've had other applications that have, and I acknowledge that the uplift provision is in the current city plan, and I've supported applications along Burley Heads there, which have led to improved outcomes that have softened the the streetscape interface. And I think it's perhaps this process, the way that it was a code assessed refused by council, but there was an improved outcome for the community that got better, and we had that height. And I think obviously putting a community through that lodges a lot of objections or submissions, going through an appeal, like having a refusal, going through an appeal, getting a better outcome, and then coming back here for another change. You know, I think that is why we've seen so many submissions on just these additional two floors. I think if the development got better in terms of what we've talked about, but I think the addition of the penthouse for just 2 extra stories, you know, the community have made their position clear around that it's just 2 extra floors, and the application is still staying the same. So I can't support that. Adding the additional 2 stories, there's no improvement of parking or any of the other interfaces. I acknowledge the separation of the other existing building to the north, but it is still, I think, impacting on the potential of the site neighbouring this application, so I won't be supporting it.
Speaker for the motion? In that case, I'll close. Councillor Martin raised a good point that it's been through public notification twice now with this, so the public have the say. I did read the submissions on this one as well, and have to admit that there was a lot of people concerned about devaluing property and those kind of examples, which aren't considerations under the planning scheme. What there wasn't a lot of in the submissions was contextual impact examples. That's probably because, apart from a visual amenity, depending on what level of building you are at the back, the only other impact from the additional height is shadow, which there was shadow diagrams as part of the presentation, which shows it's a very, very minimal additional shadow impact, and most of that impact is on public road. I appreciate Councillor Martin's point again that it is typical that normally we're dealing with a code-approved building that I'm going to politely say is an average building, and the other change being triggered for the additional height allows us, I think officers say, to panel beat it into a better looking building and improve those things, and that the public gets that chance. I do really think, but that the base that we're starting from this building is already fairly exceptional, and that it would be unreasonable to have expected major changes to build formal landscaping, given it's already been through that court-appointed process and had all that expert input. That said, it is another change. It did go through public notification, and there is nothing stopping one of those submitters from taking a submitter appeal out if they wish to proceed with that and push for any of those outcomes. The final point I'd make in it, and it's one Councillor Martin again teased out a little bit, is the idea that I think in the community's mindset, they believe that the 50% uplift should come with that community benefit of improvements. Now, technically, the uplift doesn't call for that, but possibly in the new planning scheme, whatever an uplift test, if there is an uplift test, maybe that's one of the provisions we need to seek, is that it's very clear that in going for the additional height, these are the things that must improve, and to get that language better to make sure that community expectation reflects the outcomes in terms of technical assessment. And I look forward to Councillor Martin and every councillor's input into what that might look like in the new planning scheme. Again, I believe that this application has well and truly been through a rigorous assessment, that the officer recommendation is strong, and that it should be supported by committee today. I'll close debate, put the matter to the vote. All those in favour? Division is called. In favour is Councillor Hamill, Councillor Fowler, Councillor Gates, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Dora and Councillor O'Neill. Against, Councillor Young and Councillor Martin. Councillors, that takes us back to item 6.5, so we'll...
Could I request 2 minutes of legal advice before you start that one?
Yeah, 2 minutes I can deal with. Nat, good afternoon to you. I believe you've got some guidance for us.
May I make a comment? So the declarable conflict that I raised before, I only became aware of it very quickly. And I know that you took the votes again for a number of them. So I'm just requesting, with your indulgence, I would, if you did it again, and I would request to stay in the room, because I'm now clear that that is available to me. It's definitely not a prescribed conflict. It's definitely a declarable, and I'd stay in the room for it. If not, it has been done. It's not the end of the world.
Councillor Gates, I would call upon your learned experience in this area of how we might deal with that request to retake the vote on a declarable conflict of interest.
Only giving you.
I don't think that's ever happened before.
Yeah.
No,
so,
but you have just retaken those
I
votes.
have. That was just to recast the vote on ones where we had you and Councillor Gates voting on things you shouldn't have voted on. It wasn't to adjust there. I would be more comfortable today, given the time.
We'll just keep it the same.
And
no problem.
before full council, you might be able to get a better direction of how to deal with it.
So shall I leave now?
If you wouldn't mind, I think we'll just stick with that instead of adding another cog to this complexity. Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Now we're going to get some guidance to make us all feel a bit more comfortable.
Thank you for your indulgence, Chair. So I have conferred with the General Counsel in the context of voting on a matter relating to a conflict. The committee doesn't require a quorum. It's only in relation to the substantive matter. So on the basis there still remains a quorum in the room, after conflicts are decided, then committee can proceed.
Understood. Which is interesting. So you can be left in a position where one person can vote on conflict of interest matters for a whole group of councillors. What a wonderful piece of legislation that is. Councillors, can I check, is there anyone wishing to raise questions or concerns with the guidance you've just been given, or are we happy to let Brock get back to the presentation he started an hour ago? Yeah. Brock, the floor is yours.
Through the chair, take two. What was that? So the slide in front of you shows the concept layout of the Oxford Quarry under the 1992 rezoning agreement. This plan superimposes that rezoning agreement plan over a recent aerial of the subject site. The area in red is the prior to the rezoning approval application, that was the area that was in the extractive industry zone. The area in blue, yellow and green were the areas under the rezoning agreement that were extended. The area in blue was to expand the extraction area and go into the extractive industry zone, while the area in yellow was for the processing area, and the area in green was for landscaping and screening. And ultimately the green and yellow area formed part of a special facility zone under that rezoning approval. The rezoning agreement is a private agreement between the landowner, Nerang Pastoral Company, and Council, which was executed on the 17th of March 1992, following a consent order made by the Planning and Environment Court on the 4th of February 1992, approving a rezoning application of the site to expand the extractive industry zone and create a special facility zone over the site. It was a common occurrence at the time for the applicants to enter into a rezoning agreement with Council to enshrine the conditions of the rezoning approval for the land use activity that was proposed and was going to operate under the rezoning agreement. The Oxford Quarry currently operates on the site pursuant to the conditions of the rezoning agreement. The quarry also operates pursuant to an environmental authority permit that's given by the state. Clause 11 in the agreement sets an operating period of 25 years for the quarry, however was subject to any further application made by New Crush and approved by Council. It also notes that Council is not to unreasonably withhold any further approval to extend the operating period. The request before Council is the fourth extension under the rezoning agreement. It should be noted that the first extension by 5 years agreed to by city officers noted that should the applicant wish to continue operations beyond the agreed period, then the applicant should lodge a development application. In 2019, New Crush lodged a development application seeking an approval to enlarge the extractive industry use and to realign the existing quarry footprint and extend the operating period. In November 2021, Council refused the development application. Then shortly after Council's decision, New Crush requested its second extension under the agreement, notifying their intention to appeal Council's decision, but also requesting a further extension to operate under the rezoning approval while the appeal is afoot. The subsequent third and current fourth extensions have been requested on a very similar basis to allow New Crush to continue to operate the quarry while they exercise their statutory entitlement to have the court appeal determined. It is expected that a hearing of the appeal and decision by the court will likely occur in 2026. Whilst the appeal is afoot, officers consider it would be unreasonable to withhold any further agreement to the operating period. As part of the third extension request, city officers reviewed the conditions of the agreement to identify whether New Crush had fulfilled all of its obligations under the agreement. At the time, it was identified that there was no evidence in our records in relation to Clause 30 relating to environmental management matters and Clause 42 relating to landscaping and restoration matters. As part of the third extension, it was resolved to address these matters. In August 2024, New Crush provided an environmental management summary which responded to clauses 30 and 42 of the previous resolution. The summary prepared by Groundwork Plus undertook testing of existing operations against noise, dust and blasting criteria set by the Environmental Authority permit. The summary outlines that suitable control measures continue to be implemented to mitigate noise, dust and blasting to comply with set criteria. The summary also identified that no restoration has occurred since the quarry has commenced because no terminal benches have been reached. Additionally, it was also noted that the landscaping required in the 40-metre buffer of the site's entrance may not have been achieved despite New Crush undertaking landscaping back in the 1990s. It identified that a suitably qualified person should survey the area and determine whether additional planting is required to achieve the requirements in Clause 32, being 100 native trees per hectare in the buffer area. Despite the comments in relation to restoration of the site, Clause 42 requires the applicant to submit to Council plans showing the staged and progressive restoration of the site pursuant to the landscaping and restoration clauses of the agreement. These plans were required previously to understand the staged development and restoration of the quarry as it develops. Without detailed plans, Council cannot determine when terminal benches will be reached in order to rehabilitate and restore the site. It is the officer's recommendation that Council agree to extend the operating period of the Oxford Quarry by 1 year until 15th of February 2027, and subject to similar requirements to previous extensions, but also setting out steps to address the requirements of clauses 32 and 42 of the rezoning agreement. Separate to the extension request, this report also considers New Crush's request to trial the use of electronic detonators. The request is part of New Crush's ongoing efforts to investigate the long-term variability of blasting methods to improve environmental outcomes. The trial involves the use of software modelling which considers the vibration response from a single hole fired independently and uses the information to help identify the most appropriate delay timing across a full production blast to minimise vibration and overpressure impacts. The single hole shot will occur within 2 seconds of the main production blast. It should be noted that this request will not result in any additional blast per annum. Council's blasting expert has considered the request and has provided advice which generally assures that transition to electronic detonators will reduce variability levels of vibration and overpressure. It should also be noted the Council has requested further technical material and plans from the new crush in relation to the trial use of electronic detonators. As of the writing of this report and to date, we haven't received a further response from new crush in relation to this technical matters. It is recommended that Council conditionally approve the trial use of electronic detonators and that the CEO be authorised to respond to the request following further information being provided by new crush. Thank you.
Thank you, Brock. Questions for officers? Councillor Fowler, do you want to go first, or want to defer to Councillor Gates? All right, let's let Councillor Gates. You have a crack first.
Well, I'm just a little bit perplexed why it took so long for us to know that they hadn't complied with the landscaping requirements from 1990. It's 2025.
Yeah.
It was picked up in 2023, but still it wasn't rectified.
Through the chair, in my involvement in 2023, when I was looking at the previous request, I decided to undertake a bit of a historical search of the rezoning approval, and through it, just looking at the documentation that was on the file and noting that it is a historical file from the 1990s, so some of the information is a little bit scarce. But there was documentation on there that suggested that, there was a lack of information in relation to those clauses of the rezoning agreement, and given that there were timing components in relation to those clauses, that there was nothing on the file that suggested that New Crush had had submitted material in relation to those. So we picked it up in 2023. New Crush did respond to our previous resolution providing an environmental management summary which dealt with the noise, dust and blasting measures. And it's the clause in question in relation to that was to provide updated management plan, an updated management plan to detail how they were addressing noise, dust and blasting. And it's not to suggest that they weren't doing that beforehand, because they have always been required to operate under their environmental authority permit, which regulates noise, dust and blasting. So that was that point. The point about the restoration and landscaping was a requirement that they were required to do at the 5-year mark, 15-year mark, and at cessation of use. And there's no documentation on the file that suggests that they ever complied with that. So we highlighted that in 2023. They have obviously responded saying that they haven't done any restoration of the site, and that's purely because they haven't reached any terminal benches. But from officers' view is that we can't determine when they're going to reach terminal benches if we don't actually have a plan or a progressive plan that will detail when they will reach terminal benches. So we're insistent again, as part of this, the officer's recommendation in this application, that we get those plans.
Okay. Rewarding poor behaviour.
Councillor Doran.
Thank you, Chair. Brock, I've got just a couple of very short, sharp questions. What we're being asked to assess today is an extension of the operations, whilst an appeal is yet to be determined based on a decision of council to reject an application from 2021. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct.
We've received a number of emails from the community up there telling us that the operation currently is not legal. Can you give some context around that, answer around that, please? Is it operating legally?
Through the chair, the short answer to that is yes, it is operating.
Does the long answer change the answer to the short answer?
I don't want to go into the long answer just in case we start talking about legal matters and whether we need to go into close. I'm not sure. And
it's a pretty. I wouldn't mind getting some clarification on that.
Can we provide enough clarification without the need to go to closed?
Mr. Chair, I think we can, and if you're happy to let Ms. Rachel Jones come up to the lectern. So for everyone who hasn't met Rachel yet, Rachel's a special counsel at McCulloch Robinson, who are our lawyers for this appeal and are providing legal advice. But trust Rachel's judgment, and she'll inform us if we need to go into closed session if there's any legal privilege before she gives the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Understood.
Through the chair, Councillor Doran, yes, the Oxenford Quarry is operating pursuant to historical use rights arising from a historical approval granted under old legislation. Now, that older legislation is no longer in effect. The existing framework is contained in a court order, a rezoning agreement, and an environmental authority. Even though the approval was issued under that older legislation, the use itself remains valid and the rezoning agreement continues to regulate the Oxenford Quarry.
Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, I just had 3 series of questions. The first one around the extension, the second one around the digital detonation, and the third around the landscape buffer, if that's okay, just to give you an indication of where we're heading. So firstly, in regards to the extension request, and these questions are really on behalf of local residents. So can we please explain, so New Crush have requested a 5-year extension. Can you please explain why today city officers are recommended a 1-year extension rather than a full refusal?
Through the chair, the reason we're asking, recommending a 1-year extension is to align itself with what we anticipate to be the decision, the likely timeframe to get to a hearing in the appeal and a decision by the court. We anticipate at the moment that where we're at in the appeal is we're getting close to a hearing, and it's expected in early April, May 2026, and then a decision after that. Typically, at the moment, the court process is sort of delivering decisions within 4 months. So April, May, 4 months sort of takes us to the back end of 2026. So we thought it just a round number of 1 year to February 2027 was appropriate.
And Brock, is that because the court perhaps in the appeal, and I'm careful with what I say because I'm very aware that there is an appeal going on and we all should be mindful and careful of what the language that we use, but is it that the expectation might be that it's not seen as reasonable to refuse in full and that 1 year would be defendable if that was required?
Through the chair, that is correct, yeah.
So just to be clear, could city officers or the legal team please agree that they believe a 1-year extension would not prejudice the city's legal position in the current appeal and will be defensible?
Can we go to close if it...
We don't want to go to close, no.
No, yeah, so we're really looking not to go to closed here, so take a moment and come up with something that doesn't require to go to closed.
The court will have regard to existing use rights when determining whether it should be approved or not. As I have previously mentioned, we are of the view that the existing use is lawful and valid. In the event that council formed the view not to grant the extension, there may be an argument about whether it would be that agreement would be unreasonably withheld or not. In the context of that argument, we are of the view that allowing a 1-year extension would be appropriate because council is bound by the terms of the rezoning agreement and therefore it is reasonable in the circumstances.
Thank you.
Sincerely, thank you for that. We appreciate you on the fly coming up with something that doesn't require us to go to close. Councillor Fowler?
Turning just to the matter of blasting and detonation technology, if I may. So before any digital detonation trials proceed, I know we're waiting for that information to come through, which is really great. And I think that in the recommendation, it states that we will be making decisions based on the information that we do proceed. But in the City Office's understanding, will this technology in fact improve the variability of vibration or overpressure impacts that could be experienced by nearby residents if we allow this trial to proceed?
We've obtained advice from Dr. Heelig, who's our blasting expert in the appeal. He's advised that the blasting trial will not cause additional or perceptible changes in impacts on the basis of a single hole blast that's initialed 1 to 2 seconds before the production blast. On that basis, he is of the view that it would not, it would be reasonable to allow it to occur.
Chair, while I understand that Council isn't the blasting monitoring regulator and that function really does sit with the state government, in this instance, is there any way that our blasting experts or the city could actually monitor these trial events?
Through the chair, I would say yes, but I'd be speaking for...
Brock, could I suggest that you are better to take this one on notice and provide a response back to that before full council?
That's probably best. Yep.
That would be great.
So
Thank
we'll
you, Chair.
take that one on notice.
And if I might add, regardless if it's council or through the state government, I think the results of those 3 electronic detonation trials, including the vibration and the overpressure readings, would be made available to this council and also publicly available to residents if possible. So I just wanted to put that on record. My last questions is just moving to the issue of the landscaping and compliance with the rezoning agreement. So as part of the previous extension, it was identified that New Crush hadn't yet met its landscaping and restoration obligations under the rezoning agreement, as we just discussed. Can officers please confirm how Council intends to monitor and verify that the 40-metre buffer zone achieves the required density of the 100 native trees per hectare as the stated condition to the recommended 1-year request?
Yeah, through the chair. So part of officers' recommendation in relation to the landscaping buffer along the frontage, part of the officers' recommendation is that within 3 months they will commission someone and prepare a survey of the area. As part of that, they'll also identify whether there is a requirement to put any additional planting in to achieve the 100 native trees per hectare. And then following that, just can we just go back to the last slide? Yes, so up in item 1. So yes, so it will be, like I said, within 3 months, they'll identify.
So, Rob,
sorry,
just to help. So once the tree survey, replanting and site inspections are completed, do you know if will those outcomes then be reported back to council? Is that the intent? And can residents expect a clear public update on whether the quarry has finally met those conditions?
Yeah, so the idea is that officers will go out and do a site inspection to determine whether the planting has been undertaken. From then, we can report back to council or to councillors about the outcomes of that planting.
Thank you, Chair. There's nothing further from me at this stage. However, I do have a change recommendation for councillors to consider when the time comes that I feel strengthens a couple of the points in the current recommendation.
If someone has another question, I feel like that time is now. So I'll just check. There's no other questions. In that case, Councillor Fowler, you have a change recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. So it's just up in front of people now. The changes that I've put in there is just in regards to 1A. So where it says restricting blasting to no more than 13 times per annum unless otherwise approved in writing by the CEO was the previous. What I've added in there is approved in writing and in agreement by the CEO, the mayor and the divisional councillor. And then if we go down to 4B, so I've just added in there that the trial of electronic detonation being completed it happens within the first available 3 blasts to ensure residents receive any benefits as early as possible. And if I have a seconder, I can open debate when you're ready.
I'll reluctantly second it.
I would just like to check briefly first, just in regards to the 4B one, in the correspondence or the details when talking with the applicant, is there any reason to believe why that would be unachievable for them? Like, did they ever expressly say that they couldn't do it with the first 3 blasts?
Through the chair, we haven't been provided a when the blast will occur, but we will endeavour to provide an update to council when those blasts occur, and with agreement from New Crush, we will confirm that we can do with the first 3 blasts.
That would be...
We can do that between now and full council.
If we could, please, very happy to leave the wording there today, but if we could just before full council do a check with them if there's some reason, some very strong practical reason if they can't, that we can consider then, otherwise we stick with what I think is a very reasonable addition from Councillor Fowler. Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Chair. Just a question through to Councillor Fowler. Can you just send it back to the where you say in agreement with the divisional councillor and the mayor? Would that be an operational issue, Councillor Fowler, that you'd be looking to? Like, did there have to be an agreement with all 3? I'm just trying to understand how that would really work.
Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to Councillor O'Neill. It's really to provide comfort to the residents that if there is a request by New Crush, that their divisional councillor and their mayor can represent them in that, and it's not done under delegation, just alone with the CEO.
Yep. So, Councillor O'Neill, I flagged a similar concern with Councillor Fowler before. I think it's fine, but between now and full council, we'll just have the CEO check, because there's a difference between something the CEO has a delegation for and something that is considered purely operational. I think in this circumstance, it's actually a delegation more than operational, possibly, but we'll check that for today, but I'm happy to leave it. If the CEO has a concern that it restricts a delegation or an operational matter, he can raise that at full council and suggest other wording. But the intent, I think the intent is very clear, and we'll leave with the organisation to sense check that for us.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Fowler has moved her change recommendation. Councillor Gates has reluctantly seconded. I seem to remember being in a similar circumstance to that a few years back. Councillor Fowler to open debate.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, the City is currently in the middle of an incredibly complex and high-stakes appeal, an appeal in which we've already invested well over $1 million in defending Council's 2021 decision to refuse New Crush's development application. Along with some committee members, I have had the benefit of receiving a detailed briefing from the City's barrister, and it's important that we are all guided by that expert advice when making any decisions about a further extension of operations. I've been actively involved in those briefings to make sure that what's recommended in the report before us today is not what was originally requested by the proponent. This is both a complex and emotional issue, one that deeply affects residents right across Divisions 2, 3 and 5. And I would like to acknowledge both Councillor Gates and Councillor Young on their own advocacy in recent meetings and briefings with the legal team on behalf of their residents. Now, to be absolutely clear, in 2021, Council took a strong position that the long-term continuation and expansion of the Oxenford Quarry is not appropriate. That position was made very clear when the previous Council refused New Crush's development application. New Crush then appealed that refusal to the Planning and Environment Court, and that litigation is still ongoing. Because the matter is before the court, my comments today are deliberately limited so as to not prejudice those proceedings. But for the avoidance of doubt, it is now a judge in the court, not council, that will ultimately decide the future of this quarry. Councillors, we have all received emails from many concerned residents. I want to thank those residents sincerely for taking the time to share their thoughts. I've read every one, many twice, and I've responded to each of them personally. I understand the frustration and I share the community's concern. Having a hard rock quarry mining only a couple of 100 metres from a low-density urban area for the next 100 years is not appropriate in my personal view. It was never what was intended in the state government's KRA designation over the site. The KRA was designated in 1993 and had a specified extraction timeframe of 30 to 40 years. Well, we are now at more than 30 years since extraction began. However, the long-term future of this quarry is not our decision-making role today. Our role today is much narrower. It is to decide whether a short-term extension is lawful, necessary, and that key word, reasonable. And if so, under what strict conditions so that we can ensure the best outcome for residents while not compromising the city's position in court. While my personal preference would be to refuse New Crush's extension request in its entirety, the city's barrister has advised that doing so at this stage of the appeal would likely be considered unreasonable and could ultimately weaken our legal position. On that basis, the city's legal team have recommended that a much shorter one-year extension would be both reasonable and defensible. Chair, I am mindful today of the difference between the phrase, losing the battle to win the war. As the local divisional councillor, I will reluctantly follow that legal advice today to reject New Crush's 5-year extension request, accept the legal advice that 1 year is reasonable while the appeal reaches a determination, and to ensure that nothing we do here today jeopardises the ongoing court proceedings. Councillors, as part of the existing quarry operations, New Crush has also requested approval to alter its current blasting methodology for 3 scheduled blasts to test electronic detonators along traditional ones. This trial is intended to measure whether electronic detonators, which use precise digital timing, can reduce vibration and overpressure impacts, a risk to nearby residents. The testing involves a single test shot milliseconds before the main blast, so it will be perceived as a single event, not an additional blast. Council's independent blasting expert, Dr. John Healig, has confirmed that electronic detonators can improve accuracy and potentially lessen vibration, but that a council must first be satisfied with the technical data and blast plans before any approval is given. At this stage, New Crush has not yet provided all the requested technical information, and in my view, any agreement to proceed must remain strictly conditional upon that data being received and verified. This technical trial will hopefully determine whether this newer method allows greater control and consistency, reducing the risk of any future overpressure incidents that most concern the community. Residents should be reassured that these are not additional blasting events beyond the approved 13 per year, but part of a controlled experiment to test whether technology can reduce impacts. The change in this recommendation requests the trial happens in the first available 3 blasting events, so that if there is any benefit for the community, these are realised as soon as possible. Personally, I would like this trial to be monitored and reported on by the city or the state so the public has access to the information and it can be determined if the trial was a success or not. Also, councillors, it has been unfortunately identified that New Crush has not fully met all its obligations under the rezoning agreement, particularly around landscaping and progressive site restoration. I'm pleased to see that city officers have included strong conditions in today's resolution to address these outstanding matters. These require New Crush to complete a tree survey and any necessary replanting within the 40-metre buffer to prepare and submit a staged and progressive restoration plan and to facilitate a site inspection to confirm that the works have been carried out. These conditions are important. They ensure accountability, environmental responsibility and ongoing transparency as a condition on this one-year extension.
Speaker against the motion. Councillor Fowler, if you wouldn't mind quickly before I allow you to close. I just want to make the point on the public record, and I will repeat this at full council, that you're in an interesting position of inheriting something that you weren't here for the original decision of. And to echo Councillor Gates' comments before, that your actions since taking on the role in this space of doubling down, tripling down on trying to get information out of the community in the very difficult position of having your hands tied of an open legal proceeding. But just to really compliment you on that you have taken that challenge on and have really done a great job of getting out as much information as you can and being as timely with the responses as you can be in what is a very complex piece of legal situation. So I just wanted to put that on the record, that you've done, I think, tremendously well in that space. And I know until this appeal is finished with, however long that may be, and we do hope it is the 1 year that we're looking at, but however long this may take, that you'll continue to do that on behalf of your community and make sure that every bit of information and clarity you can give them is there. So congratulations on that. Would you like to close?
Can I say a couple of words?
I'm happy for Councillor Young. Yeah, sure.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm going to be reluctantly voting in favour of the motion before us. Personally, I'd really love this quarry to cease its operations yesterday. I think it was a brave and bold move of the council a couple of years ago to refuse the egregious application that was made to pursue quarry operations for decades to come and result in significant impacts upon the community and the landscape. It was a brave decision, but it was the right one, and so we're subsequently defending an appeal about that, in which we've invested significant amount of public money and good effort too. I believe New Crush are pursuing their appeal diligently, so and these things do take a long time. So I think the application to extend the operational activities at the quarry is justified, because in the meantime that appeal can be settled. I want to personally congratulate Councillor Fowler on her representation of the community. She's certainly been like a dog with a bone on this matter. She has not let any matter get away from us. Everything's been interrogated, and I thank her for responding to the community, because we've all received those emails, and she's the one that's represented us in responding to all of those people who've shown an interest. I am always concerned about the way council's representation and position is being represented or shown in the public by some people who are very close to this appeal in the public. They should perhaps change their tone a little bit and recognise that council is doing its darndest best to get the right outcome for the community in a very difficult circumstance that predates us all by decades. I want to thank our team who we've assembled, both our staff and our consultants and experts, who are giving us great advice and listening really carefully and conscientiously to the people who are expressing their concerns, and to the councillors representing those concerns as well. Thanks, Chairman, for the opportunity to speak.
Councillor Gates.
Thank you, Chairman, and perhaps my comments earlier should have been made during this discussion rather than at the time of the conflict of interest declarations. But as the other impacted representative, I also wanted to thank Councillor Fowler, because her work on this has been amazing, to be honest, not just on the former decision that was made before Councillor Fowler became a representative, but she's gone to the trouble of exploring the key resource area designation, something that I don't I don't recall anyone ever going to those lengths on behalf of their community and taking them to the state as well. So just a job well done. I think every one of us around this chamber would be reluctantly supporting this application today, because we've made our position clear that we don't want to see another 100 years of mining at the location. The residents who live around it had all bought there presuming that the activity would cease. We've made it clear. I suppose there's nothing more that really should be said given the appeal being underway, but job well done to Councillor Fowler, and let's hope that our legal representation can continue to support Council's initial refusal.
Councillors, one final comment. Any media on this needs to be directed through the city. Obviously, it is very careful about anything that goes in the public record in regards to this appeal. So if you are approached about comment, please do not comment on it without running it through the city first, so we can make sure that we don't create any problems for ourselves. And that last point, that to the community watching this, these decisions are being made with an incredible amount of legal advice. We have not spared any money in defending this to date, and that is going to be the continued position forward. But in the end, we are an elected group of representatives who need to rely upon experts, and those main experts in this case are some very capable legal experts, and we'll continue to rely upon that advice. Councillor Fowler, to close.
Thank you, Chair. While I agree with the previous council and remain firmly opposed to the quarry's long-term continuation, I recognise that the rezoning agreement requires council to not unreasonably withhold extensions, and that legal advice recommends a full refusal today would likely be deemed unreasonable while the court appeal remains unresolved. A short one-year extension is a reasonable measure to avoid prejudicing the court process, with clear expectations that compliance obligations are met during this time. Today, I ask councillors to join me as I also reluctantly support the one-year extension subject to strict compliance, monitoring and transparency while we all await the court's final determination.
Debate is closed. We'll call division. All those in favour? Councillor Hamill, Councillor Young, Councillor Fowler, Councillor Gates, Councillor Doran, Councillor O'Neill. Against. Motion carried unanimous. Please record Councillor Martin and Councillor Patterson did not vote. Councillors, that is the end of today's items. Councillor Patterson can raise that in her committee. It's fine to raise that. No, Councillor Patterson can raise a GBI in her committee. I'm happy for that to occur. I'll close the meeting at 12:54. Ruthless.